Chapter 90. Wu-Ming took out many bottles of healing potion on the way, and after drinking all of them, his body almost recovered. Wu-Ming moved his body, and now, except for the serious injuries on his body, there was no big problem. Because Wu-Ming had the skill Magic Dragon EX, his mana was not damaged much. Wu-Ming came to the place where Karna pointed, and everywhere he looked, there was a ruin. The entire sky garden fell to the ground and was almost completely shattered. Wu-Ming released his mana and began to search for the masters who were controlled by Semiramis poison. Those masters before the Red Servant were not ordinary people, but one of the best magicians. Therefore, when Wu-Ming arrived, those magicians still had signs of life that even Wu-Ming almost didn't notice. When Wu-Ming dug them out, their bodies were already badly mutilated. Wu-Ming quickly took out 5 bottles of healing potion and gave them to each of them to drink. Yggdrasil was a game that transcended its time. Its degree of freedom was so high that it was unbelievable. But in this game, there was only one kind of item, and that was the health potion called Health Potion. There were no other medicinal items such as Mana Potion, Detoxification Potion, and so on, so they could only rely on other rare items. Because of that, as the only health potion in the game, its performance was naturally needless to say. If it was placed in a noble artifact, it could be judged as a sea-level item. Although Wu-Ming once gave Astolfo the health potion very easily, it was not a small amount. When he first treated the androids, Wu-Ming ordered everyone to take 1/3 of the health potion. That was to prevent the androids, who acted as a mana supply battery, from being infected by the bacteria in the air as soon as they came out of the incubator. Sieg was a good example. Because he left the incubator for too long, Astolfo said that before Astolfo took Sieg away, Black Archer Sharon gave Sieg a simple treatment. However, androids born as magic power batteries were different from androids born to fight. Because the androids, which were magic-powered batteries, did not need to move around in the outside world, their creators did not give them excellent physical fitness. It could be said that they would not survive without the nutrient solution in the incubator. This was the racial flaw of the androids that were born as props. Although Sieg was saved by Wu-Ming's potion at that time, Wu-Ming did not have a way to solve his gene problem. After all, even if the game had a high degree of freedom, there were no items related to genes. The game was enjoyable, not a headache. Because of the transplanting of Siegfried's heart, Siegfried was strengthened by the dragon heart and eliminated the flaws of the androids. As for whether the heart would disappear or not, since Sieg was connected to the heart, the magic circuits were naturally connected as well. Sieg's heart was supported by Sieg's magic power, so it naturally wouldn't disappear. Over time, his heart would definitely fuse with Sieg's. The androids, who were fighting forces, were not much better. After all, they were weapons that could be thrown away after being used, and they participated in the battle as cannon fodder. The androids that were rescued had their physical fitness temporarily improved by Wu-Ming's potion at that time. It was mainly thanks to Gould, the creator, who adjusted their physical condition later on, that they could live like ordinary people. As for the 5 masters, Wu-Ming was still afraid that they would die halfway, so he gave them a whole bottle of the potion. It must be noted that this was a potion that was comparable to a C-grade item. Seeing that the 5 masters had not woken up yet, Wu-Ming remembered that Karna said that they were poisoned. Wu-Ming immediately took out a short staff. This short staff could remove the poison status of any item below the divine artifact level. It was an item that could be used by injecting magic power into it. However, it had a limited number of uses. After the number of uses was used up, it would disappear. It was because Wu-Ming was restricted by his class that Wu-Ming took out this high-level item with restrictions. Moreover, Wu-Ming speculated that the poison used by Semiramis was definitely not a high-level poison, otherwise, these people would have died long ago. Detoxification. The short staff emitted a green light, enveloping the 5 unconscious people. After a few seconds, the short staff shattered and disappeared. Wuming looked at the short staff that disappeared in his hand and couldn't help but sigh. As expected of the poison used by Semiramis, the most ancient poisoner, it completely exhausted the short staff's number of uses. Although the level of this poison was not the highest, it still exhausted the detoxification short staff's number of uses. A few seconds later, the 5 people lying on the ground opened their eyes and sat up weakly. This place is... I remember the Holy Grail War is over. What happened to us? Everyone was full of doubts. Then Wuming spoke. Magicians, I am a servant of this Holy Grail War. This Holy Grail War is not over yet. You have now lost the qualification to be its master. As for what happened, you can find out in the future. This place will soon become the battlefield of a great war. After Wuming finished speaking, he turned into a spirit and disappeared. These magicians looked at the place where Wuming disappeared. They could see that the person just now was not an ordinary person, and they chose to believe in Wuming. They immediately struggled to stand up and walked in the direction that Wuming just pointed. After Wuming gave advice to the group of magicians, he went to the place where the Great Holy Grail was. Fortunately, this was a forest. If it fell into the city, it would be troublesome. Wuming thought. When Wuming arrived at the Great Holy Grail, he saw 2 groups of people facing each other. The Great Holy Grail was revealed from the ruins. It was a ball with a huge female sculpture inside. In front of the Great Holy Grail, 2 groups of people stood in front of the Great Holy Grail. On one side, there was Red Assassin Semiramis, Red Rider Achilles, Red Archer Atlanta, Red Caster Shakespeare, and Ruler Shiro Amakusa, who hurriedly came out because of the fall of the Sky Garden. On the other side, there was Red Saber Mordred, Lion Gielli, who was the master of Wuming and Mordred, Black Archer Sharon, Black Rider Astolfo, and Astolfo's master Sieg, Black Berserker Frankenstein, and Frankenstein's master Cowles, and finally, Ruler Joan of Arc, the referee of the Holy Grail War. In addition to the masters, when the servants saw the arrival of Wuming, Amakusa's people's faces changed slightly, while Joan of Arc's people were happy. Although it seemed that Joan of Arc's side had more people, in terms of heroic spirit strength, they were still stronger than Shiro Amakusa's party. If they really fought, the black side might not necessarily have an advantage, but now with Wuming, the situation was completely reversed. Only Wuming rushed over, which meant that Karna was defeated. A servant who could defeat Karna was better than Amakusa's side. Looking at Wuming's seemingly unscathed appearance, Shiro Amakusa couldn't help but frown. I didn't expect you to win against Lancer. You're not Sodric, are you, Villo, Knight of the Round Table? Shiro Amakusa said. After all, such a powerful holy sword of star, even based on Semiramis' description, Shiro Amakusa was sure that it was the noble phantasm of the Knights of the Round Table, Villo. Wuming stood beside Joan of Arc, and his helmet began to disintegrate and attach to his shoulder. Then, Wuming looked at Joan of Arc and the others, who were in a sorry state but didn't suffer any injuries. Wuming first smiled at Joan of Arc, then looked at Shiro Amakusa. Then you've guessed wrong, Shiro Amakusa. I am indeed Sodric, but that's only because I'm also a Knight of the Round Table, Vero. This time, I'm only being summoned as Sodric. Chapter 91. Because Joan of Arc and the others had already been informed by Wuming, they weren't surprised. However, seeing that the people from Amakusa weren't surprised either, it seemed that they had already been informed by Shiro Amakusa. Achilles and Atlanta revealed an expression that said, "So that's really the case." Shakespeare, on the other hand, had a happy expression. Semiramis gritted her teeth. After all, her noble artifact had been destroyed by Wuming. Shiro Amakusa smiled faintly. I really didn't expect that you, whom I met once, would become a major force to obstruct me. In response, Wuming shook his head regretfully and said, even without me, others would obstruct you. Then, do you want to come to my side, Knight of the Round Table, Silver Dragon Britain Villo? Shiro Amakusa smiled. Everyone was shocked. After all, most people, no, almost everyone, didn't want to rope in the enemy during the final battle. Wuming also smiled and said, "Do you want me to agree with the materialization of the soul, Shiro Amakusa?" Shiro Amakusa continued to smile. "That's right. Don't you think that the materialization of the soul is the only way to save humanity? You don't want humanity to repeat the same mistakes you've made in Britain, Vilo Silenceward." Then, the scene fell into silence. After a moment, Wuming spoke. "Yes, humans will indeed repeat the same mistakes." Shiro Amakusa smiled. The others also looked at Shiro Amakusa and Wuming in disbelief. "If it was me in the past, I might have agreed with you. But..." Wuming thought of his experience in Babylon, and thought of Gilgamesh, who wanted to free humanity from the shackles of the gods. "Now, I definitely won't agree with you, Shiro Amakusa." Wuming raised Meteor Silver, which had already returned to its original state, and pointed the tip of the sword at Shiro Amakusa. The helmet automatically put on. "Is that so?" Shiro Amakusa closed his eyes and said regretfully. When he opened his eyes, Shiro Amakusa didn't have the slightest bit of hatred, only calmness. At this moment, this was the saint who had given up on hatred and walked out of the Great Holy Grail, Shiro Amakusa, Shurjin. "Then I will kill everyone who stands in my way." With these words, a war was about to break out. Atlanta took the initiative to release her noble artifact. Present this calamity. Foibos Kachi. Large amounts of lightning shot towards Wuming's group, but what collided with them was a large amount of green lightning. Blasted tree. Frankenstein used his incomplete noble phantasm to clash with it. Although Frankenstein didn't speak much, it didn't mean that she couldn't speak. In her words, it was just that it took a lot of effort to speak. Astolfo rode his eagle and rushed towards Atlanta, but he was stopped by Achilles in midair. "Get down." Achilles leaped up and chopped down the eagle and Astolfo with his spear. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! When Achilles landed on the ground, a few arrows shot into his shoulder and thigh. Charon stood in the distance with his bow raised, ready to knock an arrow again. Suddenly, he felt a huge threat and quickly dodged. A few chains made of poison pierced where Charon was standing just now. TSK, he dodged it. "Am I so weak now that I've lost my noble artifact?" Semiramis said unhappily. As soon as Semiramis finished speaking, Charon felt a slight discomfort in his body. He quickly activated the crystal that Wuming gave him, and the feeling was gone. That was Hydra's poison. Charon said with lingering fear. "Everyone, be careful. The surroundings are filled with poison," Charon shouted. The others nodded and activated the detoxification crystal that Wuming gave them, including the two masters, Sieg and Collins. "Jean, go and take care of Red Assassin." "I'll deal with Shiro Amakusa," Wuming said to Jean. "Okay." Jean simply nodded, then raised the holy flag and rushed toward Semiramis. Suddenly, Wuming threw a ring to Jean. This was the ring that Wuming wore on his hand, the Ouroboros ring. Although Wuming didn't know how to use this world-class item, it had a special function. Wear it and you can resist Red Caster's spiritual attack. Joan of Arc nodded heavily and rushed toward Semiramis. "Mordred, do as you say." After hearing Wuming's words, Mordred grinned and bumped her fists, then said, "Then I must teach that poisonous woman a lesson." Wuming, on the other hand, was facing Shiro Amakusa, Shurjin. As the leader of the believers, Shiro Amakusa was already very good for him to have such martial arts skills. But if the enemy was Wuming, Shiro Amakusa had no ability to resist. Bang! Shiro Amakusa's body rolled and stopped in front of the Great Holy Grail. Pwah! Shiro Amakusa spat out a mouthful of blood and struggled to stand up. Then Shiro Amakusa once again rushed toward Wuming and roared, Vilo Saranth. Bang! Another blow, and Shiro Amakusa once again collapsed on the ground. Wuming looked at Shiro Amakusa, who was struggling to get up, and sighed. Shiro Amakusa, you still don't want to give up. Wuming looked at the battle between the other servants. Sharon, Astolfo, Frankenstein, Achilles, and Atlanta were fighting, especially Sharon and Achilles. Because it was not a one-on-one battle, neither of them fought as a warrior, but as an archer and a rider. Astolfo and Frankenstein constantly harassed Achilles, coupled with Charon's godlike archery skills. Although Achilles used his noble phantasm, Sharon had already used his once-a-day noble phantasm, Scorpio Strike, to break Achilles' immortality, which was the noble phantasm, Andreas Amarantos. Damn it! Achilles, who was on the chariot, cursed, and then just when he wanted to take out his trump card noble phantasm, Achilles Cosmos, several powerful arrows flew at Achilles. Because Atlanta was entangled by Frankenstein, and Astolfo was constantly harassing them in the sky, Achilles could not take out his trump card. Do you think I will let you take out that shield, Achilles? Sharon said to Achilles, and once again drew his bow. Sharon. Achilles was angry again, and he drove the chariot toward Sharon, but this time Astolfo seized the opportunity. Trap of Argolia. Astolfo rode the eagle and pierced the chariot's wheels with his spear, and the wheels were forcibly spiritualized. Achilles quickly jumped out of the chariot, and Atlanta just happened to avoid Frankenstein's attack and jumped to Achilles' side. At this moment, Astolfo, Frankenstein, and Sharon surrounded Achilles and Atlanta in a tripartite formation. On the other side, Joan of Arc and Mordred were fighting against Semiramis and Shakespeare. It seemed to be a 2v2, but it was actually a 2v1. After all, Shakespeare had no combat power at all. What the hell are you doing? Castor. Where is your noble phantasm? Hurry up and use it. Semiramis was repelled by Joan of Arc and roared at Shakespeare. My noble phantasm doesn't work on Joan of Arc, Empress, you have to do your best. Shakespeare bowed to Shakespeare and said very elegantly. Joan of Arc looked at the Ouroboros on her hand, clenched it, and rushed toward Semiramis again. The special ability of the Ouroboros ring was the protection of the world. World's blessing, as the incarnation of the world devoured by the devourer of 9 luminaries world, it has the blessing of a world. Although this statement was very vague, Wuming knew that a tool transformed from a world was not that simple, at least it had resistance to mental attacks. Sure enough, the world's path had the power to resist mental attacks. Just when Semiramis was ready to resist Joan of Arc's attack, a voice broke through the air. Take this. Poisonous woman. Chapter 92. Semiramis' pupils instantly froze as she raised her head to look at Mordred who was falling from the sky. Poochie. Ah! Mordred's brilliant imperial sword cut through Semiramis' chest and blood spilled all over the ground. Checkmate. Poisonous woman. Mordred turned around to look at Semiramis who had fallen to the ground and said proudly. Joan of Arc also walked in front of Shakespeare and said to him, Red Castor, do you still want to resist? Shakespeare hurriedly waved his hand, No, 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 I really don't have the ability to fight. I surrender. Saying that, Shakespeare raised his hand. You bastard, do you have to be so spineless? You actually surrendered. Mordred said viciously. No, 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 this is a wise choice. Shakespeare's face was full of joy. Turning around, Wuming looked at Shiro Amakusa. You see, you have already lost, Shiro Amakusa. Shiro Amakusa, Shurgen, continued to stand up and slowly said, So what? Shiro Amakusa stared at Wuming, You want to use failure to change my mind about saving humanity. 400 years ago, when we were slaughtered by the shogunate, I didn't retreat. How can death and failure make me change my mind about saving humanity? After a moment, Wuming looked at Shiro Amakusa, who had calmed down a little. He took off his helmet and looked at Shiro Amakusa. You are not wrong, Shiro Amakusa. However, this is a war where the winner takes all. The loser will lose the opportunity to realize their dreams. After hearing Wuming's words, Shiro Amakusa laughed again. What a pity, Vilo there answered. The Great Holy Grail has already been activated. As if to confirm Shiro Amakusa's words, the Great Holy Grail behind him began to gradually glow and slowly sank into the ground. Originally, I wanted to use the Space Garden to move the Great Holy Grail and spread the third law all over the world. However, now that the Space Garden has been destroyed, the Great Holy Grail has coincidentally come into contact with a spirit vein. At this moment, it has already begun to use the spirit vein to spread the third law all over the world, realizing the materialization of all humans. My wish is about to come true, Shiro Amakusa said very calmly. Aren't you afraid that I'll destroy the Great Holy Grail if you tell me all this now? Wuming wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he continued his conversation with Shiro Amakusa. In response, Shiro Amakusa shook his head and said, You won't. Everyone who participated in the Holy Grail War has their own wishes. Even you, Vilo Thorns, are the same. Shiro Amakusa was right. Every servant who participated in the Holy Grail War had their own wishes. No one would destroy the Great Holy Grail before it was completely beyond saving. Wuming believed that even Artoria would not take the initiative to destroy the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, Wuming didn't have any wishes that needed to be fulfilled. Moreover, he didn't believe that a mere large-scale magic storage system would be able to fulfill all his wishes. The suppression force once told him that the Holy Grail War was a ritual created by the three families of Macri, Einsberg, and Enosaka to reach the origin. The original purpose was to reach the origin. The Great Holy Grail could temporarily open the door to the origin vortex. Through this door, the magician could directly reach the origin. Therefore, the matter of fulfilling all wishes was purely a rumor. Of course, some small wishes could still be fulfilled. After all, this was a magical power that could open the door to the origin vortex. Shiro Amakusa entered the Great Holy Grail system through his own noble phantasm. Through the incomplete third magic that came with the Great Holy Grail, Shiro Amakusa made a wish to save all of humanity, allowing the third magic to spread throughout the world. Is that so? But you won't see the end. Goodbye, Shiro Amakusa. You are a person worthy of respect. His hand rose, and his sword fell. With a smile on his face, Shiro Amakusa fell to the ground. The other servants of the red team began to leave because of the death of their master, Shiro Amakusa. Achilles and Atlanta looked at their bodies gradually disappearing and gave up resistance. Sharon, Astolfo, and Frankenstein also did not continue to attack. What a pity, Wani-san. Achilles smiled. Ah, that's right. It's a pity that we can't see the end, but the Great Holy Grail has been activated. It's just a matter of time, Atlanta said calmly without the slightest regret or rejoice. Then Achilles looked at Sharon. Sensei, this one-on-one duel was interrupted. Next time, we must determine the winner. Of course, Achilles. I look forward to the moment when you defeat me. The wind came, and Achilles and Atlanta disappeared into light. On the other side, Semiramis lay on the ground powerlessly, looking at the body of Shiro Amakusa. Master, I actually feel sad. What's wrong with me? The famous Empress of Assyria left the stage. Oh. This is really a wonderful comedy, I am very satisfied. Shakespeare wrote the script and disappeared into particles. At this point, the red team servants of the Great Holy Grail left except for Mordred. So, what about the Great Holy Grail? It seems that it can't be stopped. Astolfo stood beside Sieg. Sieg, Cowles, and Leo were unable to get involved in the battle of servants as humans, so they were slightly away from the battlefield before the start. Do we really have to destroy this? That's such a pity, Mordred grumbled. It seems that this is the only way. Jean said carefully. After all, not every servant would sacrifice their wish for humans. Wuming looked at the several servants present. Sharon, Astolfo, Frankenstein, Mordred, and Jean. In addition to himself and Jean, there were 5 servants. Sharon was the first to speak. I choose to give up. Instead of restoring my immortal body, it's better to choose to save humans. I also give up. Anyway, I don't have any important wish. It doesn't matter. This is also for Master. Astolfo smiled and then looked at Sieg. I don't need the Holy Grail. My people have been saved. I think Sodric again, no, Mr. Villo. Sieg bowed to Wuming. You don't have to do this, Sieg. This is also my agreement with Sieg. Wuming waved his hand, indicating that Sieg didn't need to do this. Ho ho ho. Frankenstein also shook his head. Although he didn't know why Frankenstein didn't hesitate, perhaps Cowles had already prepared himself mentally in advance. I also give up. We will solve the matter of our Eugomarinia family. Cowles said firmly. I don't need the Holy Grail. I have found my real wish. This time, let's forget about it. Mordred laughed. Leo was a little surprised and then fell into deep thought. Then Leo opened his mouth. Then I will also give up. Mordred smiled knowingly and looked at Leo Gielli. Leo Gielli also smiled knowingly and bumped their fists. In that case, Master, use all the command seals to support me. I am going to change my class. Ha! Everyone was surprised. Chapter 93. Wait, what did you say? Change classes. Leo Gielli asked in surprise. Really? Is this something that a servant can do? Collins asked Wuming. The others also looked at Wuming in shock. In this regard, Wuming smiled. Of course, my own strength is still limited, but if I rely on this, then... Wuming said, then pointed to the Great Holy Grail behind him. You mean, rely on the Great Holy Grail to make a wish? But the Great Holy Grail has now been made a wish by Shiro Amakusa. Leo Gielli was very puzzled. Although the Great Holy Grail has been made a wish by Shiro Amakusa, don't forget that this Great Holy Grail was directly taken away by Danica in the middle of the Third Holy Grail War 60 years ago. In other words, the Great Holy Grail has stored 120 years of magic. Even if Shiro Amakusa has made a wish, there is still some magic left in the Great Holy Grail. With the command seal provided by Master, it is enough for me to change classes. Wuming explained. Then what class do you want to change? Karen asked the question that everyone wanted to ask. Wuming smiled mysteriously and said, of course it's the caster class. But, even if you are a Villo of the Knights of the Round Table, I remember that Villo only knows some small magic. That should not be enough to deal with the current situation, right? Leo Gielli asked. You can rest assured that my body is the original dragon. How can I only have one identity? Everyone then remembered that Wuming had previously said that he had many experiences in other worlds. Since Wuming could go to other worlds, there was no guarantee that Wuming had other identities in this world. Afterward, Lion Jia Jiali sighed. I understand. Then I will use the command change class as the command and use the command seal. After a while, the ruins around the Great Holy Grail were cleared by the party. Then, Wuming took out all kinds of ores, gems, and other tools that could be used to construct magic circles in Dragonest. He melted them with his mana and began to draw a summoning circle in front of the Great Holy Grail. After all, changing classes was something inconceivable for a servant, so he had to be cautious. That was why Wuming used the summoning circle. After Wuming finished his preparations, he stood in the center of the magic array. "Let's begin, Master," Wuming said to Jiali. "Yes." Everyone stood not far away from the lion's realm of calamity, watching this unbelievable scene with rapt attention. Jiali the lion raised his hand that held Wuming's command seal. "At the cost of all command incantations, my servant Sodric, change your class." After Lion Jia finished speaking, the command incantation in his hand emitted a red light and disappeared. Wuming felt the power of the command incantation and began to make a wish. "Great Holy Grail, fulfill my wish and let me change my class." In an instant, the Great Holy Grail began to shine. The magic lines around the magic array where Wuming stood also began to shine. The light became brighter and brighter. Everyone began to be unable to bear it and raised their hands to cover their eyes. After about 10 seconds, the light began to weaken. Everyone once again looked at the place where Wuming stood. Wuming was wearing a white robe. His originally black hair had turned golden. He held an ancient book of unknown origins in his hand. He looked holy, and his surroundings were filled with a holy aura. What happened? Is the contract broken? Everyone heard Jiali the lion's words and then looked at him. The command incantation that Lion Jia used on Jia's hand disappeared without a trace. According to the records of the Holy Grail War, a command incantation would leave a trace after it was used. Even if the contract was broken or the Holy Grail War ended, the command incantation would not disappear. Only the traces of the command incantation would disappear. But now, the Holy Grail War was not over yet, and the traces of the command incantation disappeared. Moreover, Jiali also clearly stated that the contract was broken. "Don't worry." A particularly gentle voice came. Collins and Jiali were a little absent-minded, but then the two of them quickly woke up. Several other servants were also slightly absent-minded, but it did not affect them much. And because Sieg had Siegfried's heart, his resistance was comparable to that of a servant. Only Jean d'Arc could resist the strange holiness emitted by Wuming. "What's going on, Sodric? Or are you no longer Sodric?" Jean asked Wuming, somewhat at a loss. Everyone looked at Wuming with some vigilance. Wuming only smiled faintly at this, causing people to become absent-minded again. "I'm sorry. After all, this is the first time I've adapted to this class. I'm still a little uncomfortable with my own power." After Wuming finished speaking, everyone felt that the sacred aura on Wuming's body was covered up. Phew, that was really scary. I felt like I was worshipping Sodric just now. Collins wiped the cold sweat from the lingering fear. That's true. If Sodric spreads this sacred aura to the maximum extent, some people with low spiritual power will become his believers. I'm afraid some berserkers will also be affected. As a person who firmly believed in the Lord, it was easy for Jean to see the essence of this power. That's really scary. Collins swallowed his saliva. At this moment, Collins was even more scared. Yes, after all, I didn't control my power. I'm sorry, Mr. Collins. Wuming said gently. About the breaking of the contract, it was my decision. After all, what I'm going to do later is a bit unbearable for Mr. Jiali. Therefore, I linked the contract to the Holy Grail. What? Doesn't that mean that you have infinite magic power now? Astolfo cried out in surprise. Wuming smiled and replied, that's not the case. Although I'm linked to the Holy Grail, I can't use the Holy Grail's magical power. Now I just have an unconscious master who can provide more magical power. In short, just like me, the Holy Grail provides magical power directly, but magical power can't be abused at will. Jean explained. Oh. I see. Astolfo's left hand turned into a fist and his right hand turned into a palm. By the way, everyone, I'm no longer Sodric. I know you're not Sodric, but I can't figure out what your identity is. I can't even see your real name with my master's ability. Jiali said while touching his chin. Everyone looked at Jean d'Arc, and Jean d'Arc nodded and began to use true name detection on Wu Ming. This is... Chapter 94. Is this true? Zod. No, I should call you Hyunryong, Sama. Jean was surprised. In an instant, everyone fell into silence. Wait. Hyunryong, is that Hyunryong? Lion Jiali shouted. Hey. Is it true? Is it really Hyunryong? Collins was also quite surprised. The servants were okay, after all, they were heroes. But Sieg was puzzled. What does Hyunryong refer to? After all, Sieg was an android who was born less than a year ago. Even if he had Siegfried's heart, he was still an android who was less than a year old. Let me tell you. Astolfo raised his hand. When it comes to Hyunryong, he is the guardian of the ancient Babylonian city of Uruk. After all, no matter in the mythology of any other country or race, there is no character who can be called the Sage Dragon. Legend has it that Hyunryong is the oldest God who can't stand the human race being ruled by the gods and secretly came down to help the human race become independent. Later, Lion Jiali went on to say, Hyunryong is the oldest God in Mesopotamia. His status as a God can be compared with Tiamat, the Sumer mythical creator of Mesopotamia. But it is more said that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat, the god of Sumer mythical pantheon. In addition to the 11 magical beasts born by Tiamat, he is also the elder brother of the 11 magical beasts. Collins added. But for some reason, the virtuous dragon did not belong to the side of the gods, nor did it belong to the side of the magical beasts. One day, it descended upon the city of Uruk and became the guardian god of mankind, Sharon said. Legend has it that Hyunryong is quite mysterious. He has neither a fixed name nor a fixed body. The reason why he is called Hyunryong is because in the oldest epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, he came to Uruk in the form of a dragon and cultivated the oldest king, the hero king, Gilgamesh. As the symbol of the end of the gods, he has the title of Sage. Back to Astolfo. Amazing. Does this mean that the French general Sodlek is a Sumerian god? Sieg exclaimed in shock. Ah! Everyone thought about it and realized that it was indeed as Sieg had said. The French general Sodlek was a Sumerian god. At this moment, Wu Ming seemed a little unnatural. How would I know that just because I taught the ancient king on a whim, the restraints turned me into such a fantasy legend? What Tiamat? What Lord God? Do you believe such nonsense? Even if there are historical records, do you believe it? Oh my God! But on the surface, Wu Ming still maintained a smile. But reality proved that the two restraints once again created an invincible identity for Wu Ming. Although the origin dragon would become as invincible as the legend said after reaching adulthood, Wu Ming was still quite a distance away from adulthood. For now, Wu Ming only had a strong life force and powerful support-type talents. There was still a long way to go before he could reach the level of the god of creation, Tiamat. Ahem. Alright, everyone, don't get so worked up. After all, I'm a special dragon who can freely roam through all eras. It's not a problem to have more legends. Also, when I'm a character, I can't use powers outside of the norm. Otherwise, that era will instantly reject me. Also, just continue to call me Sodlek. After all, as Hyunryong, I don't have a real name. Everyone understood. After all, in the historical records, there was indeed no mention of Hyunryong. There was only the name Hyunryong. After everyone calmed down, only Jean seemed to be unable to let go of something. She seemed to be thinking about something. But because time was tight, Jean didn't intend to ask anything here. Of course, Wu Ming also realized it. As someone who grew up and died with Joan of Arc, how could he not know what his childhood sweetheart was thinking? But just as Joan of Arc thought, there wasn't much time left. Wu Ming flipped through the uninscribed incantation book in his hand, and large amounts of unknown magic appeared on the Great Holy Grail. Now, almost half of the Great Holy Grail had sunk into the ground. So, I'm going to take the exam, Wu Ming said. Everyone was a little surprised. They thought that Wu Ming had already started. In fact, they weren't wrong. Wu Ming had indeed started, but after becoming caster, he became interested in the Great Holy Grail. Of course, it wasn't a wish, but an interest in the third method. Therefore, Wu Ming decided, ancient and eternal primordial dragon, show yourself and save the world once more. As soon as his voice fell, a large amount of magic began to gather from the Great Holy Grail into Wu Ming's body. Then, Wu Ming's noble artifact began to appear. Heaven Age. At this moment, everyone, including the entire Romania and even the powerful magicians all over the world, felt an extraordinary pressure. A huge silver-white dragon appeared out of thin air. It was mysterious and sacred, giving people a sense of worship. Lion Jia Jiali and Cowls had already knelt down and were mumbling to themselves. Sieg struggled, his legs bent. Because of Sieg's heart, he was not like Leo Jiali and Collins. Astolfo supported Sieg on the side, although he was also uncomfortable. Even with the enhancement of the noble relic, the white dragon was still able to affect Astolfo. The other servants were the same. Those who had magic affinity were fine. Those who didn't have magic affinity were almost the same as Sieg. Tulifas and all the residents of Romania were like pilgrims, kneeling in the direction of the great white dragon. The great white dragon landed and looked at Wu Ming and the others. Then, without saying anything, he directly grabbed the Great Holy Grail that had sunk into the ground with his hand. Like an uprooted tree, dust flew everywhere. Then, the great white dragon grabbed the spherical Great Holy Grail with one claw and flew into the sky. Maybe because it was the first time he used this noble artifact, Wu Ming triggered the punishment of this era. Just as the dragon's body gradually became transparent, as if it was about to disappear, a lightning bolt appeared out of thin air and struck the dragon. However, the great white dragon did not howl, but disappeared. At this time, the great white dragon that affected Romania and even the whole world left. The humans who were affected by the great white dragon's sacred breath were gradually recovering at this moment. When Leo Jiali and Collins came back to their senses, they saw a group of extremely weak servants, including Wu Ming. Just now, that was. Collins stuttered. Wu Ming gasped and replied, that was my original body, the original dragon at the root. Yes, one of Wu Ming's noble artifacts as a caster was to summon his original body. After all, Wu Ming was now using a body purely composed of magic. Wu Ming summoned his original body that was sleeping in the root. At the moment when the great white dragon appeared, the great white dragon and Wu Ming had the same thought, just like Wu Ming was controlling the great white dragon, or the great white dragon was controlling Wu Ming. The two were the same person. The original body that was summoned by Wu Ming's noble artifact as a caster did not have the ability to travel through the world on its own, and it also became rejected by the world. Although it was hard to believe, it was the truth. But because the modern era was the era of the disappearance of high-level mysterious creatures such as the great white dragon, the era would not allow such creatures to appear in the world. Therefore, when the great white dragon left, the punishment of the era came. The great white dragon seemed to be unaffected, but in fact, it was all fed back to Wu Ming. At this moment, the magic in Wuming's body was almost exhausted. That's right, the EX level magic was almost exhausted now. Because Wuming used magic to offset the damage of the punishment on himself, it had not completely offset the punishment brought by the era. It's terrible. Liu Jieli said. Yes, that involuntary kneeling from the heart, was terrible. Chapter 95. Indeed, after all, it's my first time using this noble phantasm. I subconsciously activated the sacred aura emitted by my body. I'm really sorry, everyone. Wuming said with a face full of guilt. Wuming's noble phantasm would open a channel in his body. This channel was big enough to accommodate his body, and small enough to accommodate even a scale. In other words, Wuming could achieve the emergence of part of his body by not fully releasing this noble phantasm. Imagine that when the opponent released a big move, he could suddenly summon the invincible dragon scale in front of him, blocking the enemy's attack. He could also summon the sharp dragon claw in his hand and use it as a weapon. As for his other noble phantasms, except for the inscription book, the other noble phantasms were obtained through sublimation. Wuming couldn't help but think of the two major restraints. There was no doubt that many noble phantasms of his caster class were their masterpieces, including his caster class template. I didn't expect that, Villo. You're so strong. If you weren't forced to leave, Father might not have to work so hard. Even if Mordred was weak because of the white dragon, she was still full of energy when she spoke. However, this unintentional sentence made Wuming silent. Perhaps she realized that she had said something wrong, so Mordred quickly changed the topic. By the way, where did your body go with the Great Holy Grail? Wuming breathed a sigh of relief, then said with a smile, of course, it's the origin. Everyone had an expression of, sure enough. My body has been sleeping in the origin. I just woke it up for a moment and summoned it to the present world, and I have to prepare to bear the punishment given by the era. This time, I almost died. Wuming said and coughed a few times. Jean walked behind Wuming and shook Wuming's back. Are you okay? Jean looked at Wuming tenderly. No matter who Wuming was, he had always been Jean's childhood sweetheart, the one who was willing to be burned to death. It's nothing serious. Don't worry. Wuming held Joan of Arc's hand and said tenderly. I have a question. Since the Great Holy Grail is no longer in this world, why haven't we disappeared yet? Astolfo raised his hand and asked the others. That's right. The Holy Grail has already disappeared, but our contract still exists, and it shows no signs of disappearing. Sharon analyzed. What's going on? Everyone was puzzled. Let me explain. Wuming stood up and looked at the servants and masters. Because when I was moving the Great Holy Grail, I deliberately delayed your contracts for a period of time. This way, you can stay in the modern world and experience life. If you don't use a relic, you can survive for about 3 months. What? I thought it would always be there. Astolfo was a little dejected. It's okay, Ryder. Even if it's only for 3 months, I'll still accompany you. Let's travel around the world together. I want to see this world and connect with the humans of this world, Sieg said from the side. Yes. Master, looking at the rejuvenated Astolfo, the other servants couldn't help but laugh, and then they thought about how to spend the rest of their time. That's it for the time being. As long as you don't do anything that violates the rules of the servants and be ordinary people, I believe our Saintess won't say anything. Right, Saintess, Wuming said softly to Joan of Arc. Oh. Cough. Since everyone helped me solve this crisis, I, as the ruler, allow everyone to move freely until we return to the Valhalla, but you can't use your power at will to avoid unnecessary trouble. Joan of Arc looked deeply at Wuming and then said, especially you, Soderlek. You will be personally supervised by me. That's it. In this regard, Wuming smiled awkwardly, followed by the others. If you don't mind, the Eugomarinia family can provide you with food, clothing, housing, and transportation for the time being. Colin said the biggest problem at present. Then we won't be polite, and with us, we should be able to fight for a big advantage when dealing with the Clock Tower and the Magic Association. Wuming said with a smile. Looking at Wuming's smiling face, Colin smiled awkwardly. He did have such an idea, but he wanted to express his gratitude for this time. After all, in the case of Danik's death, Wuming had the power to destroy the Eugomarinia family, but Wuming didn't do so. Although this was the intention of using the Eugomarinia family, when Colin's sister Fiole was facing Jack the Ripper, Wuming appeared to save Fiole. Based on this alone, Collins, who was already the acting patriarch, was grateful. Wuming also knew that Collins was grateful, and dealing with the Clock Tower was just a matter of convenience. After all, Wuming was not a bad person, and Wuming felt that the current Eugomarinia family was very good, so he would definitely help if he could. Don't worry about that for now. Let's go drink, Villo. Mordred shouted excitedly. Wuming looked at Jean subconsciously. Drinking is bad for the body. Please drink less. I won't follow you. I'll wait for you at the Eugomarinia family. Remember to come back early in the evening, Jean said naturally. However, Mordred complained, What? Ruler, you are like a housekeeper. Drinking is a rare entertainment for us Knights of the Round Table. As if thinking of something, Mordred said again, By the way, it seems that because you took the soldiers to drink secretly, you were often taught a lesson by father and others. Looking at the bright smile on Mordred's face, Wuming smiled and said, If I didn't take the soldiers to drink, how could a lonely guy like you live so comfortably? Then Jiali complained, I knew it. I didn't know that the rebellious knight liked to drink. So it was you who taught him. Really, my wallet has shrunk a lot recently. Ha 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 ha. It doesn't matter. Anyway, your money is useless. You might as well spend it. Mordred laughed and patted Jiali's back. It's going to break, it's going to break. Wuming recalled the past at this moment with a nostalgic look on his face. It was because of those who passed away that Wuming was able to grow. Moreover, Wuming looked at Jean, and Jean also looked at Wuming. The two looked at each other and smiled. Looking at the slowly rising sun, Wuming said to the group behind him, Let's go, everyone. Chapter 96. Because of the mysterious arrival, nearly 3 months had passed since the world was in turmoil. From that day on, Wuming accompanied Collins to the Time Tower. Because Wuming didn't deliberately hide his power, he deliberately released a trace of his power, causing a sensation in the Time Tower. After all, he was a top heroic spirit that could cause a higher level of mystery to descend. Not only did the 12 monarchs of the Time Tower appear together, but even the Marshal of the Demon Path, Kithit Zelik Shobind Ogu invited Wuming to his office and had a secret conversation with only the two of them. After almost an hour of secret conversation, Kishua Zelrich Subian Ogu indicated that as long as Cowles, the head of the family, could become a student of the Clock Tower, it could offset the crime of the Eugomarinia family. Of course, Wuming also gave Kithit Zelik Shobind Ogu something special, which made the Time Tower and the Magic Association not dissatisfied with forgiving the Eugomarinia family so easily. Wuming's evaluation of him, a cunning old fox. At that time, Zelik said, After all, Hyunryong Sama gave me a good gift, so let's leave it at that for the time being. Wuming was speechless. He dared to say that the gift to the Magic Association was his own. In fact, no one would dare to say anything even if that was the case. Kithit Zelik Shobin Ogu was beyond human standards. On this day, 3 months later, in a villa provided by Eugomarinia in France for Wuming, Wu-ming sat on a stone in the yard with his hands on his knees and meditated for a long time. First, Wu-ming's former saber rank limited the progress of meditation. Second, the body of a servant was not suitable for cultivation. After all, this was a degraded version of a heroic spirit. Its attributes were fixed, and even if it cultivated, it would not increase in the slightest. But for Wu-ming, there was a benefit. After Wu-ming summoned his main body, Wu-ming found that his main body had an indescribable feeling. Wu-ming felt that because the limiter temporarily disappeared when he summoned the main body, all the training that Wu-ming got from the servant body returned to the main body. Although there would not be an actual increase in strength, there was a familiar feeling. Even if he trained again, it would only take a short period of time for him to integrate everything that Wu-ming had experienced, trained, and obtained in the servant's body, including the relic. The existence of the relic was the most powerful thing that Wu-ming had obtained. Wu-ming's noble phantoms were different from Wu-ming's noble phantoms when he was a servant. There was no level restriction. In other words, Wu-ming's noble phantoms were a special item called noble phantoms. It was much more powerful than the servant's noble phantoms. Because of this, Wu-ming would pick up the daily meditation that he abandoned when he was using the servant's body. Well, actually, Wu-ming's injuries hadn't healed yet. He was also recuperating. After a while, Wu-ming took a deep breath, and a turbid gas was expelled from Wu-ming's body. Wu-ming opened his eyes and frowned as he looked at the gas that was about to dissipate. Wu-ming used magic to draw a symbol in the air. In an instant, flames ignited out of thin air and burned the turbid gas. After all, it was a magical gas that had been eroded by the power of the era. It was not good to leave it in the real world. Therefore, every time Wu-ming expelled such a gas, he would use the Lune magic to burn it out. I didn't expect the power of the era to be so terrifying. I can't imagine what kind of terrifying attack I would have suffered if I didn't adapt to time and space. Wu-ming couldn't help but think of everything he had done in the time and space tunnel before. But in retrospect, if Wu-ming didn't have the power of time and space, he wouldn't have entered the time and space tunnel. Wu-ming shook his head and stood up from the stone. He looked at the house that he had lived in for nearly 3 months. I'm really reluctant to part with it. What's there to be reluctant to part with? A girl came in from the gate. She had almost the same appearance as Jean d'Arc, but Wu-ming found that this was not Jean d'Arc. It's nothing. Did school end so early today? Letitia. Yes, this girl who looked almost the same as Jean d'Arc was the French girl, Letitia, who was possessed by Jean d'Arc. After the end of the Holy Grail War, in order to facilitate the girl possessed by Jean d'Arc, Cowles specially gave a private villa in France of Hugo Marinia to Wu-ming and Jean d'Arc. It provided for the two of them to live in these 3 months. Letitia, on the other hand, would take leave from school every day and return to this villa. In this way, Jean d'Arc stayed in Letitia's body during the day, enjoying the fun of being a student, and returned to the villa at night to live with Wu-ming. Of course, they slept in separate rooms. After all, the two were still friends and not lovers. Wu-ming, on the other hand, had a very comfortable recovery for 3 months. He quietly lived the life of an ordinary person and recovered from the damage caused by the era. Because Letitia usually didn't come back at this time, but after this time, Wu-ming asked Letitia, who came back early, after finishing his daily meditation. The Holy Virgin wanted to come back to spend these last days with you, so I came back early to give you more time to get together. Letitia smiled sweetly and explained to Wu-ming. Speaking of which, time really flies. 3 months have passed in the blink of an eye. Wu-ming sighed. Then, with a flash of light, Letitia turned into Jean d'Arc. Speaking of which, even I, the ruler of the Holy Grail War, find it a bit unbelievable. The Great Holy Grail has disappeared. Does this mean that the Holy Grail War is over? Jean d'Arc and Wu-ming walked into the villa together, Jean d'Arc said. Wu-Ming just smiled at Jean d'Arc's naive words. You also know that the Great Holy Grail is nothing more than a shortcut created by human magicians to reach the source of power. Even if it's gone, it can still be recreated. Besides, there are still Great Holy Grails in other parallel worlds. Heroic spirits are mystical life forms that can transcend time and space. Even if this world no longer has a Holy Grail war, there will still be one in other worlds. We will appear again. Wu-Ming also knew that Jean d'Arc was just simply looking forward to it. After all, Jean d'Arc also understood a lot of things after becoming a heroic spirit. Wu-Ming continued, to put it bluntly, as long as there are creatures like humans, things like desire will not disappear. Really, Wu-Ming, you are still so rough, not gentle at all. Jean d'Arc complained to Wu-Ming. Then, Jean d'Arc ran in front of Wu-Ming, turned her head and looked at Wu-Ming with a smile. Then, let's enjoy these last moments, Cedric. After saying that, she walked to the kitchen and began to cook. Really, what can a village girl like you cook? Although he complained like this, Wu-Ming was still looking forward to it. Chapter 97. The next day, the servants that the Magic Association was afraid of disappeared collectively on this day. After all, this kind of uncontrollable power was still very feared by some of the higher-ups of the Magic Association. Early in the morning, Wu-Ming and Jean sat at the dining table, eating breakfast made by Letitia. Because Joan of Arc once messed up breakfast, Letitia had no choice but to make it. Jean looked at Wu-Ming, who had been smiling, and said with a red face, really, I wasn't familiar with the kitchen at that time. It was an accident. However, Wu-Ming said with a happy face, yes, yes. Later, breakfast ended with Wu-Ming's happy and Jean's complaints. After breakfast, Wu-Ming didn't meditate, and Jean didn't go to school. The two walked slowly on the road, looking at the scenery that they were already familiar with. After a while, Jean said, Hey, Cedric, will we have a chance to meet again in the future? Wu-Ming didn't think and said directly, yes. Huh? Why are you so sure? Jean was surprised. That's because you haven't replied to me yet. I'll keep waiting. Wu-Ming said half-jokingly. Really, you're not serious again. Jean's cheeks were red and she quickened her pace. In fact, Wu-Ming was also telling the truth. After all, Wu-Ming was not dead. Although Jean was already in the Hall of Valhalla, it shouldn't be a problem for Wu-Ming to summon a Valhalla, probably. Wu-Ming quickly caught up with Jean and began a different kind of last time. Finally, Wu-Ming and Jean stood on a high ground, looking at the scenery in the distance. As if it was time, Jean turned and looked at Wu-Ming. Then, I'll go first, Wu-Ming. Well, see you next time, Jean. In the end, Wu-Ming told Jean his real name. Jean's body emitted a light, and as a gust of wind blew, the light dissipated. Letitia appeared on the spot and looked at her hands in disbelief. Then, Letitia looked at Wu-Ming in embarrassment. That. Lord Hyunryong, looking at the blushing Letitia, Wu-Ming gently said, Letitia, you've lived together for so long. Are you still afraid of strangers? Letitia blushed even more after being exposed by Wu-Ming. No. As expected, Cedric, you're still as wicked as ever. As she spoke, Letitia kissed Wu-Ming's cheek under Wu-Ming's shocked gaze. Then, she quickly ran away. Wu-Ming was at a loss as he watched Letitia run away. When he came back to his senses, he touched the cheek that was kissed and said helplessly. This is really... Wu-Ming sighed. Wu-Ming guessed that when Letitia and Jean shared the same body, she often dreamed of Jean's dream, and gradually their feelings were assimilated. Then, Wu-Ming shook his head, opened his mouth, and chanted a spell. Wu-Ming disappeared on the spot. A moment later, London, England, Clock Tower. Outside a room located at the highest point of the clock tower, a black-red ripple appeared. Wuming walked out. Wuming had a smile on his face. He wore a white robe, and his short blonde hair was overflowing with a holy aura. Wuming knocked on the door of the room. Knock knock, come in. Wuming pushed the door open and entered. What he saw was a strong old man with red eyes, white hair, and a short white beard sitting in the dark room. Oh, it's the virtuous dragon. Have the other servants returned to their seats? Demonic Marshal Kitty Zelrich Subian Augustus asked. Wuming elegantly sat on the sofa, picked up the tea that had been prepared on the table, and took a sip. Of course, I provided them with magic power and contract for only 3 months. Once the contract is broken, unless the servant's master is a true ancestor like you, it is impossible for them to continue to stay in the modern world. That's right, as the leader of the highest level of the Magic Association, the demonic path Marshal Keshua Zelrich Subian Augustus was a true ancestor. Ha ha ha, that's all in the past, who told me to lose to Zhu Yu? Zelik said with a laugh, not angry because of Wuming's words. Zhu Yu, everyone's Zhu Yu Brunstad. She is the Moon King, equivalent to the moon's suppression power. Zhu Yu was the first and strongest true ancestor in the world of the moon, so she was the origin of true ancestors and death apostles. Although Zelrich claimed that he had lost to the ancestor Zhu Yu, the truth was that the two of them were tied. Zhu Yu's body was destroyed by Zelik, but before Zhu Yu's body was destroyed by Zelik, she turned Zelik into a death apostle. Thus, Kishia Zelik Augustus became one of the 27 death apostles. However, the great Holy Grail did fall into your hands. Zelik narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. In response, Wuming laughed, that is the third method, even I, who is called Hyunryong, can't help but want to study it. Yes, although the great Holy Grail was taken away by Wuming to the Origin, it was still under Wuming's protection and had not been assimilated by the Origin. Wuming wanted to use the power of the Origin to analyze the third method, and then master this power. Wuming took another sip of tea, then looked at Zelik and asked, So, what do you want me to do, Kishia Zelik Augustus? During the hour of Wuming and Zelik's secret conversation, the two of them sparred in this narrow room. Zelik used a second spell, so the two of them did not destroy the room because of their sparring. Because neither of them used their full strength, Wuming barely won against Zelik by one move. As an old man who had lived for hundreds of years, the victory of the battle was not important. Zelik made a request in exchange for the right to bail out the Yugomarinia family. Of course, Wuming did not agree, but Zelik gave Wuming an auxiliary magic dress in exchange for a second spell, and after a moment of consideration, Wuming agreed. The premise was that it could not be something that was harmful to Wuming. Zelik said at that time, even if I wanted to harm you, it is impossible. After all, you are the teacher of the ancient king, the descendant of Tiamat, the most mysterious dragon. But only Wuming himself knew that he was not strong enough to be compared to the creator of the Sumer pantheon, Tiamat. But after all, Zelik was the product of the second method in exchange, so Wuming had to think about it. After all, the 5 great spells of the shaped moon world were one of the most mysterious. As the second method was of the same origin as the third method, it would be of great help in analyzing the third method. Wuming asked Zelik to provide a magic dress with a powerful analysis ability. Zelik was a little puzzled. Even if it was a magic dress made by the second method, it should not be of much use to someone of Wuming's level. However, as a willful request of a partner, Zelik said that he had to add one more rule, which was that his request must be the first factor of action. Wuming said that as long as it was something he could do, he would try his best to do it as soon as possible. In this way, the two of them sat politely, drinking tea and chatting happily 3 months later. I want to invite you to a parallel world. Chapter 98. Parallel World. Wuming put down the teacup in his hand and looked at Zelik with an expressionless face. Yes, because a certain mysterious person in front of me has caused an even higher level of mystery to descend, my perception of other parallel worlds has become more sensitive. It's like a sixth sense that a world-destroying disaster will descend, and it's a disaster that will affect almost all parallel worlds. Zelik continued in a low voice, unfortunately, I don't have the ability to stop the disaster from happening, and I can't even lock onto its source. But now, I know of your existence. Wuming sneered at this. As the second Archmage, even Zhu Yu was dealt with by you. How can you not have a way to deal with this disaster that affects other parallel worlds? Wuming did not doubt Zelik's judgment that was similar to a sixth sense. For someone of his level, and a full-time second Archmage in a parallel world, Zelik's premonition could be said to be incomparably accurate. Zelik was not angered by Wuming's sarcasm. He smiled and said, because I already know that I can't deal with this disaster by myself. Wuming thought for a moment and asked, is it because you went to other parallel worlds to try to deal with this disaster, but you found that you couldn't do anything to solve it, Zelik? Zelik nodded and said, that's right. I solved many things that I thought were the source of the disaster, but I found that my perception of other parallel worlds was still on the verge of destruction. So, I came to find you. As an additional servant in this Holy Grail war, not only did you follow the Red Team Saber and summon her on your own, you also had many different identities throughout history. If it wasn't for the fact that I've talked to some heroic spirits before, I would even suspect that you were the one who played almost every role in history. Of course, Wuming also knew that Zelik was joking at the end, so he did not say anything about it. Most importantly, you seem to have said that you didn't die. Wuming poured himself another cup of tea, then asked, so, you think I can solve this crisis? Zelik shook his head, then said, of course not. Although I still don't know who solved this crisis, I can feel that that person has an unusual relationship with the heroic spirits. Zelik stood up and walked to a storage cabinet. As for you, you're an extremely special heroic spirit. I'm sure you'll definitely have a connection with that person. Therefore, I'd like to invite you to a parallel world to find that person who can resolve the disasters. At the same time, you can resolve the disasters that often occur in parallel worlds. After all, the fewer disasters in other parallel worlds have, the later the disaster that will affect other parallel worlds. Zelik took out a box and threw it to Wuming. Wuming almost guessed what it was, and immediately opened it. Then, Zelik on the side said, this is the magic dress you asked for. I specially made it in the shape of a crown. This should be very suitable for your caster profession. Wuming looked at the golden luxurious crown. It's called a crown, but it's more like a ring. However, Wuming doesn't care much about what this magic dress looks like, as long as it can be used. By the way, because I am afraid that you don't like its appearance, I deliberately set it as a magic dress that can automatically adjust its appearance. It is now in an inactive state. Moreover, I also set up an artificial elf for this magic dress. Of course, it is also in an inactive state. She will wake up at the moment you activate it and recognize you as the first master. Wuming was very surprised. He didn't expect Zelik to be so concerned about this magic dress. In fact, even without these factors, Wuming has a way to master this magic dress. It seems that you are very concerned about this matter, Zelik. Of course, Wuming and Zelik both knew that Wuming was talking about the disaster. Through the perfect production of the magic dress requested by Wuming, Wuming owed him a favor and had to pay attention to this matter. After all, the matter of the Yugomarinia family and the magic attire added together was enough for Wuming to owe them a favor. Later, Wuming said to Zelik, regardless of whether this magic dress is good or bad, I will do my best to fulfill your request and block my name Wuming. Wuming. Zelik pronounced the pronunciation of this word, as if thinking about the origin of this name or related things. I'm sorry, my name is indeed Wuming, but that's Chinese. It's a stranger name for you. After all, Wuming was once picked up by the old people of the Celestial Dynasty. Even if Wuming was not human, this did not diminish the name that accompanied Wuming from the beginning. So, when will you send me there? Wuming interrupted Zelika's contemplation. Zelik immediately replied, I've decided to send you to the parallel world now, what do you think? Wuming stood up and put the crown in his hand into the open golden ripple. Then let's begin. Zelik began to cast the second spell. Looking at the speed of casting, it seemed that he had already guessed that Wuming would agree and had been gathering magic power. Just as Wuming was about to be covered by the second spell, Wuming said, by the way, remember to take care of the people I know in this world. You're asking for a lot. Zelik, who was concentrating on casting the second spell, spoke up after a moment of silence. After all, this was transferring a high-ranked heroic spirit like Wuming, so Zelik had to be cautious. However, an accident still happened. The era had left a deep impact on Wuming. When he left this era, the era shifted to his destination. Oh no! Zelik was shocked. Wuming. Remember to look for me in that world, he'll help you. Before Zelik could finish, Wuming vanished. Zelik, who had traveled to parallel worlds many times, knew that this was a normal phenomenon when traveling to other parallel worlds. Heaving a long sigh, Zelik returned to his original seat. In the face of a fate that humans cannot resist, what kind of miracle can he create? Zelik said as he took a sip of the freshly brewed tea. I'm really looking forward to it. The clock tower detected that there were no abnormalities after the heroic spirits of the Holy Grail War disappeared. However, no one noticed that a different heroic spirit had left. The world returned to its peaceful state. On the other side, Wuming opened his eyes and saw a quiet forest. It was night now, and the forest was silent. It was so quiet that it was terrifying. That old man is really unreliable. Wuming complained and began his adventure in the new world. Or rather, he had embarked on the path to saving the world. Chapter 99. Wuming thought and walked in a random direction. After a while, Wuming saw a small town through the forest. As the name implied, the town was not large. It was the kind of town that could be seen at a glance. Moreover, Wuming also found a lot of magical power in the center of the town. Obviously there was a small spiritual vein. Although it was not a lot for Wuming, it was likely to be a gathering place for a human family. Enchantments. Wuming clearly sensed that there were multiple enchantments in this town. Interesting. Wuming kept smiling and walked toward the seemingly ordinary town. Just when Wuming just walked to the edge of the town, a huge magical power erupted. A large amount of black mud, starting from the center of the town, continued to rotate and expand, like a storm of death, slowly sweeping the town. Wuming sensed that the magicians in the town were basically dead in this storm of death. At the same time, the barrier was also broken. At that moment, a strange power covered Wuming. Wuming looked in a certain direction with some surprise. Contract. Wuming frowned, then began to move quickly in the air. Several Lune runes representing suppression appeared, and with a lot of magical power from Wuming, a large number of Lune runes instantly covered the storm of death. In an instant, the black mud was suppressed and formed a black sphere. Black hole. As the spell was chanted, a hole similar to a black hole in the universe appeared, instantly sucking the black mud sphere and crushing it. Black hole was a new skill that Wuming learned from the uninscribed book when he left Nasarek. Because the uninscribed book was a magic book in Yggdrasil, World Tree. Although it was spread to the other world where Nazarek's underground tomb was located at that time, it also included Yggdrasil, World Tree, magic. No, It should be said that the magic of that other world and Yggdrasil's magic were the same system, so they could be used together. After all, the magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, could be casually displayed. Wuming preferred to use the magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, or rather, magic. But Lune magic had an extraordinary effect at certain times, just like the Lune-Rune combination used to suppress the black mud. Although Yggdrasil's magic was convenient, it was a game after all. Although there was the concept of seal, there was relatively little about this kind of magic. Moreover, this kind of seal represented invincibility and couldn't be attacked in the game. Wuming's purpose was to destroy the black mud. Naturally, it was impossible to use Yggdrasil's seal skill. That was also the drawback of Yggdrasil's transformation into reality. Seeing that the people who fled in panic had settled down, Wuming used rune magic to cast a diversion magic that could make pedestrians ignore his line of sight. Then, when the police set up obstacles to block him, he walked into the inverted semicircular hole destroyed by the black mud. Because Wuming was just contracted by someone. Moreover, Wuming felt the essence of the mysterious power, which was the wish-granting machine in the hand of his main body, the Holy Grail. After passing through a forest, Wuming saw a broken cabin on the edge of the big hole. There was also a little girl of 5 or 6 years old in the cabin. Wuming frowned a little. First, because his master was such a young child. Although he didn't know why he was contracted, it was too cruel to let such a young child participate in the Holy Grail War. Second, because Wuming saw that the little girl didn't have a smile on her face. No, it should be expressionless, like a puppet. I hope she's not a sacrifice of some magician family, Wuming thought to himself. At that moment, half of the cabin had been destroyed. Even if Wuming's clairvoyant skill was useless, Wuming knew that the cabin could collapse in an instant. At that moment, a little boy who looked to be about 11 or 12 years old ran over from the forest, but the little boy's mind seemed to be still immersed in the big hole in front of him that had a large piece dug out. Perhaps it was because of Wuming, the guy in strange clothes. The little boy quickly looked at Wuming. Gotcha. However, at that moment, the cabin seemed to have reached its limit. With a gotcha, it began to collapse. The little boy also saw the little girl in the cabin, but because he was focused on Wuming just now, the little boy didn't react in time. At that moment, the cabin had begun to collapse. Danger! The little boy yelled and ran to the cabin. But the little boy's speed was still too slow, and there was no time for him to run over. High-order transmission. At that moment, with a spell, Wuming instantly appeared beside the little girl. The little girl seemed to have just reacted. She tilted her head and unconsciously opened her mouth as she stared blankly at Wuming. Wuming instantly picked up the little girl, chanted the spell again, and appeared in the same place. At that moment, the cabin completely collapsed, and the little boy who was running to the cabin also stopped. Is this magic? The little boy said with some surprise. Wuming glanced at the little boy with a smile, then smiled at the little girl in his arms and said, "Are you okay, master?" The little girl looked at Wuming with some doubts. She didn't seem to understand the word master. Then she shook her head and said, "Other than my mother, this is the first time someone hugged me." Wuming smiled. Even if the little girl was a victim of the magician family, she was a pure child who was not contaminated by the magician. "So, how about this hug?" Wuming asked the little girl with a gentle smile. The little girl grabbed Wuming's clothes, rubbed it, and said after a while, "It's very warm." Wuming's smile was even brighter, touched the little girl's head, and said, "So, how about sleeping for a while?" Wuming began to release his sacred aura. The little girl looked at Wuming, nodded her head, lay in Wuming's arms, and began to sleep. From the perspective of the little boy next to him, the big brother in front of him was exuding a faint golden halo, and the little boy was also affected by this halo. At this moment, he felt sleepy. Wuming's caster-level skill, Sacred Aura A, was not simply the ability to bewitch people, he also had this similar effect to warm the atmosphere, make people sleepy, act as a heat source, dispel evil, repair, and other similar effects. At this moment, Wuming was using the warm effect to make people sleepy, and the golden halo was because Wuming didn't deliberately hide it. After all, the little boy in front of him knew magic, and he also saw a series of miraculous actions, so there was no need to hide it at all. For the sake of the little boy who knew how to help others, Wuming had a good impression of him. At this moment, an uncle who was about 30 years old rushed to the little boy at an unimaginable speed, grabbed him, and then began to retreat at a speed that ordinary people couldn't reach. However, that was a speed that ordinary people couldn't reach. It was simply a joke for a servant, a heroic spirit's clone. Imprisoned, Wuming used a very common restriction magic in Yggdrasil. He easily froze the uncle's body. Then, can you explain to me what's going on? This is Mr. Magician. Chapter 100. The man in his 30s in front of Wuming swallowed his saliva and broke out in cold sweat. He understood what the creature in front of him was, and he also understood how destructive and unpredictable the creature in front of him was. Not to mention whether his origin bomb could affect it, but if it didn't, it would be troublesome. His own life was not important. What was important was the child in his hand, his adopted son. If something happened to him, he would not forgive himself. So, sir, can you tell me where you are going with this child? I won't allow anyone to kidnap a child in front of me. Wuming said gently. Wait, Kiritsugu is not a bad person. The little boy who was grabbed by Chia-si, who was already immobilized, said weakly. No matter what, the little boy also knew the existence of magic. For the situation that happened at this moment, the little boy was not very worried. After hearing the little boy's words, Wuming instantly understood. The man who was immobilized by him should be with the little boy. The man should know the identity of Wuming, or the creature called servant. I see, then how many Holy Grail wars is it now? Wuming said gently. The 4th Holy Grail war, but it's over. The man looked at Wuming cautiously and suspiciously. Wuming also knew what he was wondering. The Holy Grail war was over, but his servant still existed, so he had to be cautious. So that's how it is. I was too rash. I apologize to all of you here. Wuming said and lifted the immobilizing spell on the man. The man breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at Wuming and the little girl in his arms, and then took the little boy to the remaining house near the big hole. It seemed that he wanted to collect information. Wuming didn't care about the impolite man. Wuming pointed on the ground, and a simple house appeared there. Because Wuming had the power provided by Yggdrasil Baba, he could slightly control the wood element. The main purpose of building this house was to give his little master a place to rest for a short time. Wuming took out a piece of cloth and put it on the wooden bed as a sheet, then he settled his little master, took out another piece of cloth, and covered her body. Then Wuming snapped his fingers, and a warm atmosphere filled the room. Wuming looked at the cup-shaped seal in his little master's hand and sighed. Wuming almost guessed that his little master's family probably died in this disaster. When Wuming came to the big hole, he released his magical power. After exploring, except for his little master and the father and son, there were no other humanoid life forms nearby. Wuming left the room and gently closed the door. Then Wuming gently jumped on the roof and sat down. Wuming knew that the father and son just now would definitely come to him again. Wuming didn't believe that the magician would come to this town that just suffered a disaster. In this way, Wuming began to meditate. On the other side, Amiya Kiritsugu and Shiro Amiya, the father and son Wuming met just now. At this moment, they were investigating the magician's family. I see, this is the godchild, the Shutsuki family secret. The uncle Amiya Kiritsugu looked at the ancient document in his hand with slight excitement. It was written that the Shitsuki family's girl was a natural holy grail after birth, able to fulfill wishes without any cost. This power would only disappear when the girl grew to the age of 7. This kind of girl was called the Godchild. Godchild would subconsciously fulfill the wishes of the people around her. In order to not let the children of the Shitsuki family be overwhelmed by these wishes, every time a girl of the Shitsuki family was born, the Shitsuki family would set up a barrier for the Godchild. In the barrier, no one except the mother could enter. Godchild would stay in the barrier until she was 7 years old. After that, the Godchild's power would disappear. Only then would she be allowed to come out of the barrier. In this case, the girl would explain the disappearance of 7 years on the grounds of treating a disease or being adopted by a relative. Kiritsugu, it says here, this generation's Godchild, if the wish machine wants to fulfill the wish of saving the world, her soul will be imprisoned by the world forever. Shiro Amiya was a little surprised. After all, the soul would be imprisoned by the world forever. He really couldn't imagine how painful it would be. Ah, yes. Amiya Kiritsugu held his head and said, we know the way to save the world, but we didn't use the Godchild's method, and we couldn't even find the Godchild. Shiro Amiya looked at Amiya Kiritsugu with some surprise, as if wondering why he could say such a thing. Yes. Amiya Kiritsugu raised his head and looked at Shiro Amiya as if he had found a target. Shiro, the little girl next to the servant must be the Godchild. Shiro Amiya was puzzled. Kiritsugu, what do you mean? Find it, negotiate with it, and first find out what its real name is. Amiya Kiritsugu stood up and walked out of the room. Shiro Amiya also put down the book and quickly ran out. Remember, Shiro, the servant is a degraded version of the heroic spirit. Every heroic spirit was once a hero. The so-called hero is the kind of guy who has no feelings of ordinary people. They are all tools of heroic beliefs. Except for the command curse, nothing can control them. Kiritsugu looked at the wooden house that appeared out of thin air and continued to say to Shiro Amiya, from the series of actions just now, it can be seen that he is the kind of servant with the order attribute who will not kill for no reason. Generally, as long as you don't touch their taboo, you will be fine. Shiro Amiya looked at Amiya Kiritsugu, looked at his somewhat scary eyes, and nodded. Wuming opened his eyes and looked at the father and son who came to this side and smiled. Then, Wuming, Amiya Kiritsugu, and Shiro Amiya exchanged names. Then, Wuming learned about the situation of his master from Amiya Kiritsugu. Oh, Godchild. Wuming thought. Amiya Kiritsugu and Shiro Amiya stood opposite Wuming. Yes, in order to protect the last orphan of the Shitsuki family, we want to protect her. Even if you are a servant and have been instilled with the knowledge of this era, you can't better protect her in human society. How about we cooperate? Amiya Kiritsugu looked at Wuming with a blank expression. Wuming laughed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at you. For magicians, my master is a rare universal wishing machine. I really can't think of anyone who wants to protect her. Then, Wuming looked at Amiya Kiritsugu, who was still calm, and Shiro Amiya, who was looking at Amiya Kiritsugu with a worried face, and said, well, then I accept your protection. I hope you don't let me lose hope, Amiya Kiritsugu-san. Wuming stretched out his hand and expressed a happy cooperation. Ah, happy working with you, Wuming. Chapter 101. Later, Wuming hugged the sleeping Shitsuki Meiyu and followed Amiya Kiritsugu and Shiro Amiya to Amiya Kiritsugu's residence in the city's winter wood. Late at night, a car stopped in front of a house. Wuming hugged the sleeping Meiyu and got out of the car. After Amiya Kiritsugu and Shiro Amiya got out of the car, Amiya Kiritsugu carried the few remaining books found in the Shitsuki family and told Shiro Amiya, Shiro, go and prepare a room for Mr. Wuming and Shitsuki Meiyu. Shutsuki Meiyu was the name written on the record found by Amiya Kiritsugu in the collapsed cabin. There was no doubt that it was the name of the little girl in Wuming's arms. I don't need it. Wuming stopped Shiro Amiya, who was about to prepare a room, and continued, "Help me prepare a room for my little master." I don't need it. Shiro Amiya looked at Amiya Kiritsugu and then nodded. I understand. Then, I will go in first, Mr. Amiya. After that, regardless of Amiya Kiritsugu's opinion, he walked in with Meiyu in his arms. Amiya Kiritsugu didn't care about Wuming's behavior. In his opinion, servants were tools. He didn't need to be good to them. He just needed not to provoke them. Because the Amiya family had a lot of bedrooms, and the house was relatively empty, Shiro Amiya could move in after a simple cleaning. Wuming followed Shiro Amiya to a room. There was nothing on the clean tatami, except for the quilt. Because I didn't know that someone was going to move in, there is no other furniture except for the quilt. Wuming looked at Shiro Amiya in front of him, who looked very restrained, and said with a smile, "Thank you, and it's okay. You can go do your work." Wuming went into the room and closed the door. Wei Gongshi stared blankly at the closed door. Servants aren't as bad as Cut made them out to be. Wei Gongshiro mumbled to himself as he left. Wuming waved his hand, and the room was suddenly filled with a sacred feeling. Wuming put Meiyu on the bed and covered Meiyu with a quilt. After casting a warm lune rune for Meiyu, Wuming's spirit form disappeared. On the roof, Wuming appeared and sat on the beam. He looked at Amiya Kiritsugu, who was moving books, and Shiro Amiya, who was helping Amiya Kiritsugu. Wuming turned his gaze and looked at the bright moonlight in the sky. He began to organize the information he got. First, the contract between Wuming and Meiyu was not initiated by Meiyu, but after the enchantment was destroyed, the people's desire to be saved was conveyed to Meiyu. It happened that Wuming, a servant, was nearby, so Meiyu passively signed a contract with Wuming. In fact, even if there was no contract, Wuming would have erased the Black Storm mud. Not only because Wuming promised Gemwing Zelik that he would do his best to save the world, but also because of Wuming's own will. As a former human, Wuming didn't want to see a disaster happen. If possible, Wuming would still help humans. And Wuming didn't play any word games. Whether it was to protect the world, or save the world, Wuming would do it. Second, the Fourth Holy Grail War in this world ended not long ago. According to Amiya Kiritsugu, the Fourth Holy Grail War had ended almost 5 years ago. Amiya Kiritsugu was not a participant in the Fourth Holy Grail War, but Amiya Kiritsugu was a good friend of one of the masters. According to Amiya Kiritsugu, 2 of the 3 masters who held the Holy Grail War had died, including his good friend. At the end of the Fourth Holy Grail War, the Winterwood, which was located at the place where the Holy Grail War was held, suffered a large-scale destruction. Shiro Amiya was Amiya Kiritsugu's adopted son in that war. Moreover, this world had been prophesied that humans would eventually be destroyed. Destruction, will it be because of this world? Is my little master the human who has many connections with the heroic spirits? Wuming thought. After thinking for a moment, Wuming shook his head, and his spirit form disappeared. Just like that, Wuming's first night in this world passed. The next morning, before dawn, the people of Winterwood City were still asleep. Wuming appeared in the courtyard in his spirit form and stretched. Sure enough, the body that is used to sleep is not adapted to the body in spirit form. That's right, Wuming was not dead after all, he was a different kind of heroic spirit. In addition, Wuming had lived a normal human life in France. In other words, every night, Wuming would go to bed and sleep. Although Wuming could not sleep as a servant, it was a bit difficult for a servant who was used to sleeping. Therefore, Wuming directly removed his spirit form. Let's go and prepare Master's toiletries first. She probably hasn't woken up yet. With that, Wuming walked out of the Amiya mansion. A moment later, Wuming came back with a series of toiletries for young girls. Wuming walked to the door of the room that Shiro Amiya prepared for Meiyu and stopped. It seems that children of this age can't take care of themselves. As he said that, Wuming walked in another direction. A moment later, Wuming came back with a basin of hot water and a wet towel. Knock knock. Wuming knocked on the door, then pushed the door open and walked in. In this room full of sacred atmosphere, Meiyu sat on the bed, the lower half of her body covered with a quilt. Because Meiyu fell asleep after meeting Wuming, Meiyu's clothes were still the same as before. It was a gorgeous dress similar to a witch's costume, and Meiyu had a flower-shaped hair ornament on her head. Masked. Looking at that expressionless face and cold red eyes, Wuming felt a tinge of heartache. Meiyu, why are you awake so early? With that, Wuming walked slowly to Meiyu's side, squatted down, put the things in his hands aside, and looked at Meiyu. Children shouldn't wake up so early, you need to sleep well. Wuming patted Meiyu's head. Meiyu's face showed a hint of confusion, as if she was wondering why he patted her head. I couldn't sleep, so I woke up, Meiyu said after a while. Wuming smiled sweetly at Meiyu. Is that so, then let's wash up. Then, with Wuming's help, Meiyu successfully finished washing up. Then, Wuming brought Meiyu to the edge outside. Meiyu, sit here for a while, I'll prepare food for you. Meiyu looked at the edge made of wooden planks, then looked at Wuming and nodded. Meiyu hugged a cloth ball and sat down steadily. Wuming then started to go to the Amiya family's kitchen. But at this moment, Wuming stopped and looked back at Meiyu. Wuming found that Meiyu was just sitting there in a daze. Wuming frowned, and then a loon rune appeared in the air, and a few cute little fairies appeared beside Wuming. This was a loon magic to summon a familiar. Then, the little fairies flew to Meiyu's side. Meiyu looked at the little fairies in surprise, then looked at Wuming. In response, Wuming only smiled. Then, he left the room and went to the kitchen. Seeing Wuming's back disappear around the corner, Meiyu turned her gaze and looked curiously at the cute little fairies, and the corner of her mouth curved up slightly. Chapter 102. Well then, let me see what ingredients the Amiya family has. After that, Wuming didn't find anything. After all, it was a place where he didn't come often, so it was easy for the ingredients to go bad. After that, Wuming didn't say anything and directly used the space door and walked in. After a while, Wuming came out with a series of ingredients. As for how to pay, Wuming said that he had some gold coins in his dragoness that weren't very useful. Just as Wuming was preparing food in the kitchen, Shiro Amiya walked in with a yawn. Hey! Mr. Wuming. Shiro seemed to be at a loss at the moment. He really didn't expect that the legendary heroic spirit would actually cook in person. Are you scared by me, Shiro Amiya? Wuming didn't turn his head and said in a gentle tone. No. I didn't expect Mr. Wuming to cook in person. Shiro Amiya said with some embarrassment. Wuming put the cooked food on the plate and said, Don't look at me like this, I'm also a teacher, and teachers are omnipotent. I see, is Mr. Wuming a teacher? Who did Mr. Wuming teach? Shiro Amiya asked curiously. Wuming turned his head and looked at Shiro Amiya. And Shiro Amiya seemed to be aware of his own behavior. Inquiring about heroic spirits was equivalent to inquiring about their weaknesses. For those who became heroic spirits, their own death was sublimated by the legends and thus became a weakness. Just like Wuming's previous saber class, Wuming might instantly return to the heroic spirit palace if he used a fire magic spell that was large enough to destroy a servant. Of course, to Wuming, this was just a respawn point. But Wuming was a caster at the moment, so Hyunryong wasn't dead, but Hyunryong wasn't needed anymore. Perhaps only a weapon that contained a large amount of human power would be able to harm Wuming. "I'm the great sage who taught the hero king," Wuming joked as he walked towards the door with a plate of food. Before he left, he added, "By the way, I left some ingredients for you and Mr. Amiya. You can use them directly." Shiro Amiya looked at Wuming's back as he left, and then looked at the ingredients on the stove. "Mr. Wuming is not as difficult to get along with as Kiritsugu said." With that, Shiro Amiya began to prepare breakfast. On the other side, Wuming came to the edge and saw Mayu, who was sitting on the edge and playing with the elf. It was rare for Mayu to have a smile on her face. "Mayu!" Wuming shouted at Mayu. Mayu turned her head and looked at him with a puzzled face, and the smile on her face was gone. Sure enough, it will take a while for Mayu to grow into a normal child. "Mayu, come and taste the food I made." Wuming put a plate of exquisite food in front of Mayu. It was a plate of golden omelette rice. As a person who doesn't cook, it was basically impossible to make such a plate of omelette rice, whether it was color or fragrance. However, this was a world full of mysteries. Well, Wuming used magic and added his own sacred aura to this plate of omelette rice, so it looked like it was glowing. Looking at Mayu looking at the plate of omelette rice but not eating, Wuming sighed. "Do you need me to feed you?" Wuming asked gently. Mayu thought for a moment and nodded. Wuming smiled helplessly and then picked up the plate of omelette rice. Wuming picked up the spoon and cut a hole in the egg skin of the omelette rice. The rice inside the egg skin instantly broke out, showing the golden rice grains. The rice grains were mixed with ham and vegetables, showing a different kind of beauty. Mayu looked at this scene, her eyes slightly widened. It can't be helped, who told this guy to deliberately use magic as an auxiliary means to make it? Wuming scooped up a small spoonful of golden rice with meat and vegetables, gently blew on it, and handed it to Mayu. Mayu looked at Wuming, then looked at the spoon in front of her, and finally gently opened her mouth and ate the spoonful of rice. The moment the rice entered her mouth, Wuming could see some ripples in Mayu's eyes. Wuming smiled. Mayu slowly chewed the food in her mouth, and Wuming patiently waited. After a moment, Mayu swallowed the food in her mouth and said, "Delicious." Looking at Mayu's "I still want to eat" expression, Wuming's smile became more brilliant. "Eat more if it's delicious." "Okay." Just like this, Wuming slowly fed Mayu the omelette rice spoon by spoon, and Mayu ate the food on the spoon that Wuming handed over. This meal took about half an hour. As for whether the omelette rice would get cold, Wuming said that the rice blessed by his skill would not get cold. Finally, Wuming put down the plate and spoon in his hand, and looked at Mayu who was still savoring the aftertaste. Coincidentally, there was a grain of rice hanging on the corner of Mayu's mouth. Wuming reached out to remove the grain of rice, but just as Wuming used a finger to pick up the rice, Mayu opened her mouth and ate the grain of rice. Wuming smiled awkwardly. Because, at this moment, his finger was still in Mayu's mouth. After pulling his finger out of Mayu's mouth, Wuming awkwardly looked at the finger that was covered with Mayu's saliva. "Wash it off." "Isn't that disdaining Mayu for being dirty?" "Don't wash it off." "Then why do I keep this finger covered with saliva?" At this moment, Shiro Amiya came out from the corner. "Mr. Wuming, I prepared some miso soup for you and Shuoyu." Shiro Amiya put 2 bowls of soup in front of Wuming and Mayu. "Thank you very much," Wuming politely said, and then began to drink. Mayu looked at Wuming pick up the miso soup, and also picked it up. After Wuming finished drinking, he put down the bowl and commented, "Not bad, you really are a good seedling to be the court's husband." Shiro Amiya smiled awkwardly. After all, it was a joke, not a serious one. "It's not as good as the previous egg dumpling rice," Mayu suddenly said. Is that so? I'm sorry, I'll work harder next time. Shiro Amiya was a little embarrassed. After the two finished drinking, Shiro Amiya packed up the cutlery including Wuming's egg dumpling rice and left. You can't be so rude, Meiyu. Wuming taught Meiyu. But, it's really not as good as the egg dumpling rice. Meiyu tilted her head and said innocently. Wuming was a little helpless. He knew that Meiyu now lacked the emotions of a normal human. This kind of situation could not be solved by magic. It was better to let nature take its course. Wuming patted Meiyu's head and said, "You're right, but you still have a lot to learn. Remember not to define something too early." "I know, big brother." Meiyu nodded. At this time, Wuming just remembered that he did not tell Meiyu his name. After all, the two just met last night, after which Meiyu fell asleep, and did not wake up until this morning. At this moment, Meiyu, who did not cry or make a fuss, was considered very good among her peers. "I'm sorry, it's my negligence not to tell you my name. My name is Wuming." "Wuming. My name is Shitsuki Meiyu." Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you." "Nice trip." Chapter 103. After breakfast, Wuming was going to take Meiyu out to buy some clothes. At the door, Amiya Kiritsugu came out of the house. "Where are you going to take it?" This seemed to be a very plain sentence, but Wuming heard another meaning. It was as if Wuming wanted to take away Amiya Kiritsugu's water bag in the desert. "I'm going to take my master to buy some clothes." "Mr. Amiya, are you interested in coming together?" Wuming said with a gentle smile. For some reason, Wuming always smiled when he was Hyunryong. Wuming would fake a smile to those who didn't need it, but Wuming would smile from the bottom of his heart to those who needed it. Amiya Kiritsugu didn't speak. After a while, he said, "Can you let Shiro go with us? Shiro hasn't bought new clothes for a long time." Wuming didn't make any objection to this, but looked deeply at Amiya Kiritsugu. Then Wuming said, "Of course, I like children very much." A moment later, Shiro Amiya was called out by Amiya Kiritsugu. "Shiro, you follow them. Buy whatever clothes you want. You haven't bought new clothes for a long time." Amiya Kiritsugu said and handed some money to Shiro Amiya. Shiro Amiya took the money and followed Wuming and Meiyu. After all, Wei Gongshi was wearing a new set of clothes that he had just bought. After Wuming left with Shitsuki Meiyu and Shiro Amiya, Amiya Kiritsugu lit a cigarette. Poop! Amiya Kiritsugu exhaled a long smoke. Hero King. Hyunryong. Amiya Kiritsugu couldn't help but think of the words Shiro Amiya said when he sent him food. Mr. Wuming just said that he is the Hero King's teacher. Kiritsugu, do you know the Hero King? Amiya Kiritsugu quickly finished a cigarette. If it's really you, then it's really bad. After all, in the mythology, the reason why Hyunryong came to Europe to teach the Hero King was because Hyunryong liked humans very much. And Wuming to Shitsuki Meiyu, who was a human and his master, would not allow Amiya Kiritsugu's wish. Suddenly, Amiya Kiritsugu knelt on the ground, covered his mouth with his hand, and coughed a few times. A few drops of red blood dripped to the ground. "Is it time?" Then, Amiya Kiritsugu stood up and went back to the house. Wuming held Meiyu's hand, followed by Shiro Amiya. Looking at the scene that she had never seen before, Meiyu opened her eyes curiously. Wuming specially studied the magic barrier of the Shitsuki family for Meiyu. That is, to prevent the wishes of the world from reaching Meiyu's ears and causing pollution to Meiyu. Because he was a caster, Wuming's ability to analyze magic and other things was still very strong. However, Wuming did not analyze the barrier by himself, but used the gift given by Zelik. "Master, after testing, the magic barrier around Miss Meiyu is working well at the moment, and it is comparable to the magic barrier of the Shitsuki family. Thank you for your hard work, Collis." You are too serious, master, this is my pleasure. Wuming was wearing a translucent golden-green crown similar to a dragon's horn on his head at the moment. This crown was the high-level magic headwear that Zelik made for Wuming with the second method, golden-green stone. Wuming couldn't help but recall that moment. After Wuming came to this world, he couldn't wait to use this magic dress. In the forest, after Wuming activated golden-green stone, the original ordinary ring turned into a golden-green crown similar to a dragon's horn, floating in front of Wuming. Nice to meet you, master, I am your special magic dress, golden-green stone, Collis Ballet. Listening to this emotionless female voice, Wuming felt a little uncomfortable. After all, Wuming hoped that the artificial elf in his magic dress could be more lively. After all, Wuming didn't think of using it as a prop, but as a partner. Nice to meet you, can I call you Collis? Wuming walked and asked the dragon's horn floating in the air. This is your right, master. Wuming stopped and looked at golden-green stone. Listen to me, Collis. You can call me master, but don't think of me as your master. Golden-green dragon's horn stopped floating in the air as if it was waiting for Wuming's next sentence. We are partners who will live and die together. Remember, I am not an ordinary servant. I am a heroic spirit who has not died. After that, Wuming began to walk again. Golden-green dragon's horn was silent for a moment and then followed Wuming's pace. Then, it tightly wrapped around Wuming's head. Wuming touched the dragon's horn and smiled. Then Wuming used concealment magic to temporarily hide it. Feeling someone pulling his hand, Wuming came back to his senses and looked at Meiyu beside him. What's wrong, Meiyu? Wuming asked Meiyu. Meiyu pointed in a direction and said, that one. Wuming looked at the direction Meiyu pointed. A restaurant with an omelette appeared in front of Wuming's eyes. Wuming instantly knew what Meiyu was thinking. Wuming smiled happily, then squatted down and said, have you just eaten, you little greedy cat? Then, he scratched Meiyu's nose with his finger. Meiyu was a little panicked. She covered her little nose and looked at Wuming blankly. Looking at such a cute Meiyu, Wuming smiled even more brightly. Let's come here after we buy clothes, okay? Wuming asked softly. Okay. Meiyu nodded and then grabbed Wuming's hand again. Wuming stood up and looked at Shiro Amiya behind him. Amiya, come later, it's my treat. Shiro Amiya looked at Wuming with some surprise, then asked weakly. How did Mr. Wuming pay? Shiro Amiya just remembered that Wuming, as a follower, had no money, so how did he buy those ingredients? The money Kiritsugu gave was not enough to buy clothes and food. Ha ha ha. Wuming laughed twice, then said, I'm the teacher of the Hero King, who has all the treasures in the world, the tuition is enough for me to eat and drink. So that's how it is, then Mr. Wuming is very rich. Ha ha ha, of course. In this way, the three of them went farther and farther away. However, Shiro Amiya did not notice a problem. Everything that came with a servant was made of magic, but Wuming's items could be left in the modern world. This was also because Shiro Amiya did not understand the servants and did not understand the Holy Grail War, so Wuming exposed his information. Even if he wanted to tell Amiya Kiritsugu, it was fine. Wuming had already seen that Amiya Kiritsugu's vitality was almost gone. Chapter 104. Wuming brought Meiyu and Shiro Amiya out of the department store. The three of them did not have anything in their hands as they were all kept by Wuming in his Dragonist relic. Wuming brought Meiyu and Shiro Amiya to the restaurant that they came across earlier. After ordering a portion of omelette each for Meiyu and Shiro Amiya, Wuming brought the two of them to a seat. After a while, the waiter served the omelette. Due to Wuming's actions, Shiro Amiya was not reserved around Wuming. He picked up the spoon and said, "I'm going to eat." Then, he began to enjoy the meal. On the other hand, Mayu kept looking at Wuming as if to say, "Why aren't you feeding me yet?" Wuming smiled and shook his head helplessly. Then, he said, "Remember to eat by yourself in the future. Don't always let others feed you." "Okay." Mayu nodded and looked at Wuming with anticipation. Then, Wuming picked up the plate of omelette, picked up the spoon, and cut open the egg. Then, he began to feed her just like how he fed Mayu this morning. Shiro Amiya looked at the heartwarming scene with jealousy in his eyes. "When will you be able to feed me the cub?" Shiro Amiya seemed to have realized something and shook his head frantically. No, I'm going to be a righteous man. How can I let others feed me?" With that thought, he seemed to be motivated and began to eat in big mouthfuls. After Shiro Amiya finished eating, Wuming only fed her half of the omelette. Then, under Shiro Amiya's gaze, Wuming finished feeding her. Wuming picked up a tissue and wiped the corner of Mayu's mouth. Then, he said, "Okay, let's go." "Okay," Mayu said calmly. Then, she added, "This omelette isn't good. It's not as good as yours." Wuming looked at Mayu who wanted to say something. "But, it's very warm." Wuming was silent. As a human who could grow up normally, Wuming could not imagine what Mayu, who was almost 6 years old, had experienced in the past 6 years. She was only allowed to see her mother and live in that small house. She was not allowed to read books or understand the outside world. She was not allowed to have feelings for anyone. She was not allowed to do anything. Although this was for the good of Mayu and the other divine children, it was still a little too cruel. After a while, Wuming picked up Mayu. "Mayu, maybe you don't understand now, but you have to remember that your name is Mayu. You are no longer Shoyu. You don't need to bear any responsibility of the Shitsuki family anymore. Because, I am here." After saying this, Wuming's aura suddenly changed, as if a god had descended. Mayu, who was picked up by Wuming, opened her big red eyes and looked at Wuming. At this moment, Mayu's eyes were slightly moist. Moreover, Mayu seemed to feel the feelings conveyed by Wuming. Then, Mayu lay in Wuming's arms, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. Before Mayu fell asleep, Wuming vaguely heard a sentence, "Thank you." Wuming suppressed his aura, and then Wuming cast a mute magic on Mayu, and said to Shiro Amiya, "Let's go, Shiro Amiya." "Yes. Yes." Shiro Amiya looked at Wuming with some surprise. Now, Shiro Amiya knew why his adoptive father, Amiya Kiritsugu, was so afraid of followers. Soon, Wuming carried the sleeping Mayu, followed by Shiro Amiya, and the three people returned to the Amiya mansion. After Wuming settled Mayu, he followed Shiro Amiya to see Amiya Kiritsugu. "As long as I am here, Mayu will not become the Great Holy Grail." After leaving this sentence, Wuming left. Shiro Amiya looked at the gloomy face of Amiya Kiritsugu, and didn't know what to do. Amiya Kiritsugu's face was gloomy. He should have thought that if it was really that Hyunryong, whether it was out of love for humans, or because Mayu was his master, Wuming would protect Mayu. Then, Amiya Kiritsugu spat out a mouthful of blood, and sat on the ground. "Kiritsugu." Shiro Amiya quickly ran to Amiya Kiritsugu's side and helped him up. At this moment, Amiya Kiritsugu's face was even more aged. "Hey! Dad! What's wrong with you?" Shiro Amiya said anxiously. Amiya Kiritsugu shook his head. He knew that his body couldn't take it anymore. He spat out blood because he had finally found a way to save the world, but he was stopped by an invincible person. "Shiro, you must remember our wish." Shiro Amiya looked at the current Amiya Kiritsugu and nodded heavily. On the other side, Wuming returned to Mayu's room. Looking at the still sleeping Meiyu, Wuming smiled with relief. Wuming was now even more convinced of what he had said. I'm here. I will definitely protect you, Meiyu. As if hearing Wuming's voice, Meiyu slowly opened her eyes. Then, Meiyu got up in an instant and threw herself into Wuming's arms, just like a newborn bird throwing itself into its parents' arms. Wuming hugged Meiyu, and then Wuming found that Meiyu's eyes had turned golden at this moment. Just like himself. Wuming's hair and eyes turned golden because of the high-density divinity brought by his caster rank, Hyunryong. Meiyu's original eyes were undoubtedly red, but at this moment, they became the same as Wuming's. Is it the Holy Grail's ability to grant wishes? Wuming thought of Meiyu as the Holy Grail, who had the ability to passively grant other people's wishes before the age of 7. Although Wuming had used the emerald to simulate the Shutsuki family's magic barrier, someone as strong as Wuming could still penetrate the magic barrier and convey wishes to Meiyu at a very close distance. It turned out to be the case. Is this the reason why I said I'm here? After all, the Holy Grail was not omnipotent. It could only choose the most appropriate way to grant wishes at present. Perhaps for the judgment of the Holy Grail system, for Meiyu, letting Meiyu become Wuming's family and be protected by Wuming was the most ideal idea of no need to bear the responsibility of the Shutsuki family. No wonder Meiyu was so tired that she fell asleep. It turned out that the Holy Grail played a role in fulfilling Wuming's wish, which led to Meiyu's exhaustion. Well, this is not bad. Then, you are my sister. Please take care of me, Meiyu. With that, Wuming put one of his hands that was holding Meiyu on Meiyu's head and touched it. Well, please take care of me, brother. In this way, the person who Shutsuki Meiyu died, the so-called Meiyu who was Wuming's sister was born, and a new life began. Chapter 105. In the afternoon, a golden-haired, golden-eyed young man walked on the streets of Winterwood City with a smile on his face. Some of the more powerful people in Winterwood City looked at Wuming with shock and relief when they saw Wuming. From time to time, he would stop at a gourmet shop to buy some delicious food. In the end, the young man would always visit the food market. When he walked to a familiar shop, the young man had just reached the door when an uncle who was the store manager walked out and shouted, "Yo, Amiya, you're here to sell food again." Wuming looked at the store manager who greeted him and smiled. "Yes, I have to make my cute sister's favorite omelette rice." As expected, the meat in your shop is still the freshest. The uncle laughed, "Ha ha ha, of course. I've been running this shop in Winterwood City for more than 10 years. The freshness of the meat is one of the best." At this time, the store manager of the next shop suddenly appeared. "Humph. If you want to talk about the quality of the ingredients, you have to look for my shop. Although the meat in my shop is slightly inferior, the vegetables in my shop are the freshest in Winterwood City." "You old man. Are you trying to make trouble for me?" "You're the one who's trying to make trouble for Brother Amiya. It's obvious that Brother Amiya wants to cook for his beloved sister. You actually sold your stale vegetables to Brother Amiya while I was busy and closed the shop. I think you're provoking me." Looking at the two quarrelsome store managers who looked like they were about to fight, Wuming felt helpless. "The two of you have a good relationship," Wuming said gently. The two uncles had taken root here ever since Wuming bought food here. Although they looked like they were in conflict, they were actually quarrelsome. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put their shops together to do business. Hearing Wuming's words, the two uncles snorted and then took out the ingredients that they had prepared. "Amiya, this is the best meat that I've carefully selected. I'll sell it to you at the same price as before. Brother Amiya, these are the vegetables that I personally picked. I'm selling them to you at the same price as before." Wuming smiled helplessly, paid the bill, thanked him, and left. Then, the two uncles began to discuss. Brother Amiya is such a good returnee. Why does he always buy ingredients personally? Another uncle said, it's obvious that you're ignorant. Amiya dotes on his sister a lot. Every time he cooks for his sister, he buys the ingredients himself. That's true. Otherwise, with Brother Amiya's family business, he wouldn't need to run errands himself. That's great. I wonder if he'll take a fancy to my daughter. Forget about it. I think my niece is better. It was another round of shoulder to shoulder, as if they were about to fight. Wu-Ming, who hadn't gone far, listened to the conversation between the two uncles' store managers and felt helpless. At this time, Wu-Ming had been in this world for almost 5 years. 5 years ago, Wu-Ming used magic to hypnotize various high-level officials and underworld leaders in Winterwood City, making them all think that Wu-Ming was a very powerful senior who had returned from overseas. He also used magic to hypnotize the director of a large company with an address in Winterwood. Then, Wu-Ming put his name in this company. After that, he took out the few remaining treasures in his dragonist and exchanged them for a large amount of currency. After all, when he was in Nasarick, Wu-Ming took out most of his treasures to supply Nasarick. Since then, Wu-Ming's treasures had shrunk significantly. At this time, Wu-Ming's dragonist had no treasures except for some necessary props. Also, after Wu-Ming and Meiyu came to Amiya family, Amiya Kiritsugu passed away not long after, as if he had fallen asleep. Wu-Ming didn't plan to help Amiya Kiritsugu with his treatment, and Amiya Kiritsugu didn't plan to let Shiro Amiya or himself ask Wu-Ming for help. That man already had a trace of death. No, it should be said that he died long ago. If there was no Shiro Amiya, then the only thing left was a walking corpse acting in order to save the world. Wu-Ming adopted Shiro Amiya and Amiya Meiyu as Amiya Kiritsugu's distant relative from abroad. That's right, at this time, Wu-Ming's name was Wu-Ming Amiya. Although it wasn't much, the name was always fake, so there was no need to pay attention to it. Wu-Ming returned to the gorgeous Amiya mansion, put down the ingredients, and prepared to pick up Meiyu, who was about to finish school. Meiyu was taught the basics by Wu-Ming, and then waited for about a year. After all, the secret of the Shitsuki family attracted many magicians. When Meiyu was in primary school. At this time, Meiyu was 10 years old and was in primary school, while Shiro Amiya was 17 years old and was in high school. Shiro Amiya gradually became stronger after Amiya Kiritsugu passed away, just like how he always refused Wu-Ming's pick-up and drop-off. Wu-Ming still remembered the words of the 12-year-old Shiro Amiya. I'm already 12 years old. I've grown up. I don't need Big Brother to pick me up. Because Wu-Ming adopted Shiro Amiya and Amiya Meiyu as a distant relative of the Amiya family, both of them called him Big Brother. Meiyu didn't want to be outdone, and seemed to want to go to school alone. In the end, Wu-Ming resolutely refused. What a joke, Meiyu was only 6 years old at that time. There was still about a year before the characteristics of the Shitsuki family godchild disappeared. It was inevitable that there would be magicians who knew about the Shitsuki family's godchild. Amiya Kiritsugu was suspicious because the Shitsuki family deliberately hid girls under 7 years old. There would definitely be magicians who suspected or even knew about the Shitsuki family's godchild. As for Meiyu's golden pupils, Wu-Ming used a special kind of magic, similar to contact lenses, to turn Meiyu's golden pupils into a special color between orange and pale gold. For the time being, he called it orange gold. Wu-Ming also changed his pupils to orange gold. Together with Shiro Amiya's orange-yellow pupils, they looked like a family. Wu-Ming locked the door and headed towards Meiyu's primary school, Suichu Hara Academy. To be precise, it was the primary school of Suichu Hara Academy. Because Wu-Ming was worried about Meiyu, Wu-Ming gradually quickened his pace. He arrived at Suichu Hara Academy. Suichu Hara Academy had a high school section and a primary school section. Wu-Ming calculated the time. Shiro Amiya, who was in the high school section, and Meiyu, who was in the primary school section, were almost finished with school. However, Wuming still walked to the entrance of the primary school section. Next to the high school section of Suichu Hara Academy, there was another school, which was the primary school of Suichu Hara Academy. After waiting for a moment, the school bell rang. Slowly, people began to walk out of the school. These were all returning home, including Meiyu and Shiro. After a moment, Wuming saw a petite figure in the crowd. Meiyu! Wuming shouted at Meiyu with a smile. Brother! Meiyu trotted and sped up, throwing herself into Wuming's arms. Chapter 106. Wuming crouched down and hugged Meiyu, who was running towards him. He stroked Meiyu's head and said, "How was it? Did you listen to the teacher and wait for me in school?" "Yes, I was very obedient today. Also, I made a new friend today." Meiyu looked at Wuming with her big eyes and said cheerfully, "Oh. Friend? What kind of friend?" Wuming was a little happy. Meiyu had been in this school for almost 4 years. Wuming still remembered that at the beginning, many people thought that Meiyu was a strange child, and no one was willing to be friends with her. After all, Meiyu had just developed feelings for him. It was no wonder that people would say that about Meiyu. At that time, Meiyu didn't care much about it. Wuming once asked Meiyu why she wanted to go to school. According to Meiyu, going to school was something that Wuming wanted. Meiyu would do what Wuming wanted her to do. This made Wuming very helpless at that time. This couldn't be blamed on Meiyu. When she had just developed feelings for him, other than Wuming, even Shiro Amiya, who she saw every day, couldn't attract Meiyu's attention. Meiyu only cared about Wuming. At that time, Wuming followed Meiyu almost every day in spirit form. Firstly, it was to protect Meiyu. Secondly, it was to pay attention to Meiyu's behavior in school. Wuming wanted to slowly guide Meiyu according to her interests in school. In the end, Wuming discovered that Meiyu's interests could be said to be 0, or it could be said to be all. Meiyu was very interested in this world that she didn't see before. Especially under Wuming's guidance, Meiyu developed feelings for him. However, Meiyu wasn't interested in anything in particular. Moreover, Wuming was called to the office more than once by the head teacher because of Meiyu's lack of feelings in school. Wuming had no choice but to use the reason that Meiyu had been in a car accident and suffered severe brain damage to dispel the doubts of the teachers. Fortunately, around 2 years ago, Meiyu's feelings at that time had almost completely recovered. Other than her cold voice and introverted personality, she was basically the same as an ordinary person. From then on, Meiyu began to gradually make friends. Every time Meiyu made a friend, she would confide in him. Wuming would also listen patiently and ask Meiyu from time to time. It was the same this time. "She's behind. Let me introduce her to you," Meiyu asked with a red face. "And I also want to meet Meiyu's new friend." Wuming looked in the direction that Meiyu pointed. A little girl with golden curly hair and a ponytail was hiding in a corner. Her small head was poking out to look at Wuming and Meiyu. "Erica, over here." Meiyu waved at the little girl with golden curly hair and a ponytail. The little girl named Erica heard Meiyu's call and walked over awkwardly. "Brother, this is Erica, Erica Ainsworth," Meiyu said to Wuming. Wuming looked at Erica with an expressionless face. Erica also looked at Wuming with a strange smile. "Is that so? You're Erica. I'm Meiyu's brother. My name is Amiya Wuming. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you." However, after Erica finished speaking, her mouth changed as if she said something, but Meiyu didn't see it. Wuming's expression didn't change. He said to Meiyu, "We have something to do today. I'm really sorry. Erica, we'll leave first. With that, the Wuming pulled Meiyu out of the Suichuan primary school. Erica didn't move from her spot. A moment later, a teenager wearing the Suichuan primary school uniform came over. Erica, are you sure it's him? Is that so? Then let's go. With that, the teenager left with Erica. Wuming held Meiyu's hand and walked on the road. Meiyu asked with some concern, "Brother, what's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Wuming held Meiyu's hand and said while walking, "Meiyu, when did you meet that Erica?" Although Meiyu was puzzled, she still told Wuming the information about Erica. "When I was eating lunch this afternoon, Erica suddenly ran to me and said that she admired me and wanted to be friends with me. The strange thing is, I've never seen Erica in school. Maybe she's a new student." Wuming was relieved. This new year, Wuming felt more than once that someone was watching him, and there were more than once magicians who attacked the Amiya mansion. Although these people were dealt with by Wuming, but every time they were dealt with, the magician would turn into a puppet. With Wuming's eyes, he could naturally see that this was the most basic magic of magicians, replacement magic. This was a high-level method of replacing a person's personality with a puppet. The only one who could use this kind of magic was one of the three families of the Yu family, the House of Einstein Barons. Wuming didn't know whether the other party was Einstein Barons or not, and didn't know why the other party didn't take the initiative to come, but this didn't affect Wuming's fear. Wuming secretly gave Meiyu the Emerald Stone in order to prevent Meiyu from being harmed during school, and also set up a large number of teleportation magic on Meiyu. If there were any accidents, Wuming would be able to teleport over in an instant. Moreover, in the past 5 years, Wuming had transformed the Emerald Stone into a noble relic. Emerald Stone, Colossus Beryl, Chrysoberyl, level, C+ type, human noble relic distance, 050 maximum capture, 100 people. It was a magic attire specially made by the second mage, Keshua Zelrich Subian Augustus. It was a magic attire with artificial spirits. Normally, it would be used as a head ornament, but it could borrow the magic of a parallel world to perform detection, scanning, analysis, simulation, disguise, transformation, warning, defense, and a series of other types of high-level magic attire. After becoming a noble artifact, its performance became even more perfect. However, because it was a magic attire, its level could only reach C rank. Colossus' intelligence was quite high. Wuming asked Colossus to take care of Meiyu. After much reluctance, Colossus followed Wuming's arrangement and hid on Meiyu's body, becoming an accessory on her school bag. As for the Erica he met today, Wuming could feel that she was a living god-level character. At that time, the words Erica mouthed were Hyunryong. This made Wuming shocked. This meant that the other party already knew his identity. Looking at how fearless she was, she probably had a way to deal with him. Wuming was puzzled as to how he was exposed. Since then, after knowing that there was a hidden enemy, Shiro Amiya's memory of him had been erased by Wuming. Of course, this was under the condition that Shiro Amiya was willing to do it. Meiyu, our peaceful days are coming to an end. Meiyu was stunned. Wuming could feel that Meiyu's hand was trembling. Do you mean that I'm going to be separated from brother? Meiyu said to Wuming with a gloomy face. Of course not. I said that as long as I'm here, you don't have to bear the responsibility of the Shitsuki family. Wuming looked at Meiyu seriously. Meiyu nodded seriously. Then, the two of them walked towards the Amiya mansion. Chapter 107. After returning home, Wuming activated his magic workshop in the Amiya mansion. The golden staff of the 7 snakes floated in the middle of the magic workshop. The entire Amiya mansion had been completely transformed by Wuming into his own temple, the Hyunryong Temple of Worship. Shiro Amiya had also returned to the Amiya mansion. As soon as he entered the door, Shiro Amiya shouted, "Brother! Mayu!" Wuming appeared and looked at Shiro Amiya. "What do you know, Shiro?" Wuming asked. Shiro Amiya gave the letter he received in school to Wuming. Wuming opened it. "Dear Hyunryong, your concealment methods are indeed brilliant, making the House of Einstein Barons search for nearly 5 years before we found the Holy Grail container. Next, the House of Einstein Barons will start the Holy Grail War, in order to fight for the Great Holy Grail. Shutsuki Mayu, please look forward to it." Wuming finished reading the letter and looked at Shiro Amiya. "Shiro, who gave you this letter?" Shiro Amiya was a little embarrassed, but he still said, "It was my good friend in school, Yulin Shu, who gave it to me." Wuming finally understood why Shiro Amiya was so unbearable. A good friend who had been with him for a few years suddenly turned against him. This made Shiro Amiya, who was not a magician, feel a little overwhelmed. It seems that Yulin Shu is a fake name. The other party is very likely from the House of Einstein Barons. "Big brother, are you talking about the destroyed Eins Balin, one of the 3U families?" Because of Wuming's teaching from time to time, Shiro Amiya could be regarded as a first-class magician at this moment. However, Shiro Amiya was talented in swordsmanship and projection magic. According to Wuming's suggestion, Shiro Amiya could practice projection magic more. Any basic magic should not be ignored, just like the House of Einstein Barons replacement magic. Wuming often used advanced item creation to create some items or weapons he had seen before for Shiro Amiya to analyze their composition and practice projection magic. Also, Wuming taught Shiro Amiya basic swordsmanship, but he did not teach him anything else. In Wuming's view, Shiro Amiya's talent in swordsmanship was far above projection magic. Wuming could only guide his path, not teach him. Shiro Amiya was a little sad, then said, "What the hell is going on? Didn't Mayo's ability disappear? Why did the Holy Grail War happen, brother?" Because of Wuming, Shiro Amiya understood the rules and requirements of the Holy Grail War very early. "This is the fate of the Shutsuki family," Wuming said seriously. Wuming once visited the Holy Church in Winterwood City. A priest named Yen Fengili confessed everything to Wuming. The godchild of the Shutsuki family was artificially created 400 years ago for the purpose of the Holy Grail War. The godchild of the Shutsuki family was used as a vessel to create the Holy Grail War. By sacrificing the souls of the servants, the Holy Grail War was created. In the Fourth Holy Grail War, 2 of the 3 families who organized the Holy Grail War were killed, and the remaining family also suffered a great loss. They might not even be able to maintain their status in the magic world, so the Holy Grail War was never held again. The Holy Grail War was to use cards with the servants' power to turn the masters into servants. 7 servants would fight each other, and the wish would be fulfilled on the last day. This is a war sooner or later. I'm going to the clock tower in England. You and Mayu stay here. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave this house. This is already my magic workshop. Even assassin can't sneak in, and berserker can't come in. I know. I'll participate in the Holy Grail War and protect Mayu. Shiro Amiya said solemnly. Wuming flicked Shiro's head. Let's not talk about whether you have a card or not. I'm here. You don't need to worry about the Holy Grail War. Shiro Amiya covered his forehead with a pained expression. Wuming thought for a moment and took out some defensive items from his dragonist. He told Shiro Amiya how to use it, and Wuming created a celestial lock. This is a celestial lock. Look at the other party's fearless face. I'm afraid that the other party has a divine servant. Take it first, just in case you need it. I know, brother. Shiro Amiya took the celestial lock with a serious face. Wuming looked at Mayu, who had been hiding in the corner from the beginning, and instantly came behind her. Mayu. Aw dash. Meiyu was obviously shocked and looked at Wuming with resentment. Woo. Brother Wuming, looking at Meiyu, who was embarrassed because she was caught eavesdropping, Wuming smiled. I know you have the ability to bear all this, so I told you about the magic world from the beginning. But I don't want you to learn magic. I also know that you're working hard. You've basically finished reading all the high-level books you want. Wuming has always bought a lot of books. At first, it was about the ways of the world and developing feelings. Later, Meiyu began to ask for more high-level books, such as anatomy, mechanics, and so on. Wuming didn't refuse Meiyu. After all, this was what Meiyu wanted, not what Wuming wanted. Meiyu looked at Wuming seriously. But I'm also your servant, master, and you're my master, master. It's natural for me to protect you. Wuming picked up Meiyu's hand and revealed the hidden command incantation. Also, you're my sister. With this, how can I let you bear all these? Wuming hid the command incantation again and said to Meiyu with a gentle face. Don't worry, I'm here. Meiyu's eyes were wet. She once again remembered what Wuming said that day, because I'm here. Moreover, your brother Shiro is not someone to be trifled with. You don't need to think about these things at all. You just need to think about the future. I understand, Brother Wuming, I'll stay in my room. Meiyu nodded and said in a choked voice. Wuming smiled with relief. War Gate. As his voice fell, a dark portal appeared in front of Wuming. Wuming waved his hand, and a pendant flew out from Meiyu's room. The pendant changed in the air and turned into a pair of golden-green dragon horn headwear, and firmly put on Wuming's head. At this moment, Wuming looked more like a dragon. Shiro, take care of Meiyu. Shiro Amiya nodded solemnly. After looking at Meiyu, Wuming stepped into the portal. Then, the portal disappeared, leaving Shiro Amiya with a serious and uneasy face and Amiya Meiyu with a praying face. At this time, Wuming appeared in a place he had been before. The familiar corridor, the familiar door. Looking at the familiar door in front of him, Wuming knocked on the door. Please come in. Then Wuming opened the door and went straight in. Chapter 108. Wuming opened the door and went in. What he saw was the same as the other world. In the dim room sat a sturdy old man with red eyes and a short white beard. Kitty Zelik Shabine Augustus. Should I call you Hyunryong or Wuming? Zelik said with a smile. Whatever you want. It's my name anyway. I'm here for something, Wuming said indifferently, then sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. Zelik from the other world asked you to come, right? You want to ask about the information of this world, right? Zelik asked. Yes, but can you please answer me? How did the humans in this world end up being destroyed? I promised Zelik to save the world if I could, Wuming said after taking a sip of tea. The disaster in this world has been solved by me and my other self. Solved. Wuming looked at Zelik. Because the other me in the other world sensed a disaster that could affect parallel worlds, the other me began to unite with the other me in the other worlds. This world of mine has already been saved by the me in the other worlds through the second method of uniting. Wuming was relieved. After all, Wuming also noticed that the magicians in Winterwood City seemed to have received some kind of notice and were no longer so extreme. Then, could it be because of this that the other party is not in a hurry to hold the Holy Grail War? Wuming thought. I need more information. Seeing that my other self trusts you so much, I'll reluctantly help you. Zelik looked at the dragon horn hair ornament on Wuming's head. After about half an hour, Wuming left the room. Because the Zealot of this world knew that Wuming would come to this world long ago, when Wuming appeared, Zealot found out about Wuming's whereabouts through various means. Because Wuming lived in Winterwood City for 5 years, Zealot also did some research on Winterwood City. Therefore, Zealot knew a lot of information that Wuming did not know. According to Wuming's description, Zealot judged that the other party might be the last person of Ainsworth, named Julian Ainsworth. Although the 3 families of the Yu family suffered heavy casualties in the Holy Grail War, including 2 families including Ainsworth, Ainsworth's last person, Julian Ainsworth, did not want to face this fact. Therefore, even if he knew that humanity had been saved and the world would not be destroyed, Julian still wanted to continue the Holy Grail War. According to Zealot, Julian's wish might still be to save all of humanity. Because as long as one was human, there would be no future without danger. With danger, there would be progress. Zealot knew about the heroic spirits of the 7 class cards and their users. Although those users had long said that the personalities of some people who had died long ago were replaced with machines on the dolls. Other than that, Zealot did not have any other information. After getting the information, Wuming left. Although this world might not be the world that brought danger to other parallel worlds as Zealot said, Wuming did not plan to leave. The main reason was because Meiyu had left a deep impression on Wuming. Wuming could not abandon Meiyu. There was also Shiro Amiya, the magician who had normal human thinking. Because of Wuming's influence, Shiro Amiya had long abandoned Amiya Kiritsugu's wrong wish and had his own new and correct wish. Wuming opened the portal and returned to the Amiya mansion. As soon as he returned, Wuming discovered that there were people fighting in the courtyard of the Amiya mansion. It was a tentacle-like monster and Shiro Amiya who had used a class card. In one of the rooms of the Amiya mansion, there was an injured purple-haired girl who was about the same age as Shiro Amiya. She was lying unconscious on the ground. At that moment, Wuming more or less knew what had happened. Wuming waved his hand, and an oval lens appeared beside Wuming. Wuming walked toward the purple-haired girl's room while watching Shiro Amiya and the strange tentacle-like monster fight. The tentacle-like monster was 3 meters tall, and its face seemed to be a skull mask. It looked like the monster was made of tentacles. This is Assassin. Wuming discovered the monster's true form. That was right. This was the assassin user of the card in the Holy Grail War. He watched as Shiro Amiya held 2 swords in his hands and kept dodging assassins' attacks. From time to time, he would throw flying swords and stab assassins back. On the other hand, the tentacle-like monster formed by assassin was completely unaffected. The huge tentacle-like fist kept bombarding the ground. Some of the marble slabs on the ground in the courtyard were smashed away, and soil was splashed everywhere. The originally beautiful Amiya mansion was now a mess. As if the time was right, Shiro Amiya dodged one of Assassin's attacks and jumped onto Assassin's back. He held a pair of black and white swords in his hands and stabbed toward Assassin's back. In an instant, an explosion occurred inside the tentacle-like monster. Then, there was a heart-wrenching scream. Ah! Shiro Amiya jumped to the side of the wall and looked at Assassin who was curled up. He stretched out his hand and a black bow appeared in Shiro Amiya's hand. Then, Wei Gongshiro projected a slender, spiral-shaped sword. This is the Rainbow Sword. Yes, Wuming recognized this sword. This was the famous weapon of Fergus MacRoy in Celtic legend, Caladbolg. Because it was shaped like a spiral, it was also called the Spiral Sword. Because Wuming had met Fergus before, he recognized this sword. Although he was a strange guy. At this moment, this rainbow sword was obviously very different from the real rainbow sword. It was too slender, as if it was modified for shooting. Let's call it the fake spiral sword. I see, projection magic, Wuming suddenly realized, then said, I'm really worthy of the future you, Shiro. With Wuming's eyesight, he could already see the original body of the hero spirit card Shiro Omiya used. If there was no accident, it was the future Shiro Omiya who became a hero spirit after death. Shiro Omiya drew his bow and aimed at the curled-up tentacle ball, but a cherry-colored scarf happened to float by. Shiro Omiya seemed to have thought of something and put down the bow. Wuming smiled. Wuming once taught Shiro Omiya that once the opponent was determined to be the enemy, don't give the enemy a chance to breathe, unless... Weigong Shiro held the pseudo-spiraling sword in a reverse grip, and with the speed of lightning, he fiercely stabbed backwards. A purple-haired man with a skull mask with missing legs and arms appeared behind Shiro Omiya. The fake spiral sword steadily stabbed into his abdomen. "Why?" the purple-haired man asked in shock. "You're the one who said it. Your tentacles can move freely after leaving you." Unless, he had absolute confidence in winning. Chapter 109. Shiro Omiya pulled out the pseudo-spiraling blade, and Assassin fell to the ground weakly. No. No. I don't want to die. I don't want to. Assassin's card user crawled forward with great difficulty. Shiro Omiya jumped down from the wall, dispelled the bow and sword in his hands, and reformed the twin blades. He walked step by step towards Assassin's card user. "If I didn't activate the transfer technique in time, your sister Sakura would probably have the same idea as you," Shiro Omiya said calmly. "But Sakura isn't dead. I was only following Master Julian's orders." Assassin's card user seemed to have thought of something, and stopped talking with a face full of disbelief. Ha! Ha 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 ha! What Master Julian? Damn it! Fortunately, Sakura was saved by you. Shiro Omiya, come on, finish me off, finish off a dead person like me. Assassin's card user first laughed, then cried, and then asked Shiro Omiya to finish him off. Wuming turned off the X-ray mirror, and walked into the room where the girl called Sakura was. As soon as he entered, Wuming smelled the thick scent of blood. Wuming took a closer look, and saw that Sakura's chest and back were covered in blood. If he was not mistaken, it was caused by Assassin. Could this girl be Shiro's lover? Wuming said with interest. After joking, Wuming made a few gestures in the air, and a few lune runes that symbolized healing were attached to Sakura's body. With a burst of green light, Sakura's clothes instantly became brand new. If not for the bloodstains, anyone would have thought that she was a sleeping girl. Wuming walked out of the room, and gently closed the door. Wuming then met Shiro Omiya, who had finished off Assassin. At this moment, Shiro Omiya was still in his heroic spirit state. He wore a red headband on his forehead, and a white cloak fluttered behind him. He wore a black tight shirt and long pants, and the red sleeve on his left arm was tightly pressed against his skin, revealing the muscles that were usually hidden under his clothes. Weigong Shiro took out a palm-sized card with a skeleton mask and a dagger drawn on it and handed it to Wuming. "Big brother, it's just as you said. After I killed Assassin, he turned into a doll. This card is stuck on the doll. Once, a magician attacked Shiro Omiya. After Wuming killed him, the magician turned into a mechanical doll. Therefore, Shiro Omiya also knew about the doll." Wuming took the card and said to Shiro Omiya, "I've healed your lover. Go and take a look. She should be waking up soon." Shiro Omiya blushed a little at Wuming's words. He then stopped his heroic spirit state and handed the archer card in his hand to Wuming. After saying, "Thank you, big brother," he quickly ran into Sakura's room. Wuming looked at the two cards in his hands and frowned. Although the user of the assassin card was easily defeated by Weigong Shiro, that was only because the user of the assassin card wasn't strong. It didn't mean that the card itself was weak. Wuming could clearly feel the presence of heroic spirits in these two cards. Especially this assassin card. Wuming could feel that there was more than one heroic spirit in it. There were about 19 of them, but each user could only use the power of one heroic spirit. Wuming turned on the surveillance camera in the magic workshop and looked at it. After Wuming left, Meiyu and Shiro Amiya stayed in the house and did not go out. However, after a while, a girl came to the Amiya mansion. That girl was Sakura, who was treated by Wuming. Shiro Amiya might have known the girl named Sakura, so he brought her to his courtyard. After entering the courtyard, Sakura first cried and threw herself into Shiro Amiya's arms. Then, Sakura took out an archer card. "Senior, this is the strongest card, Archer Hero King Gilgamesh." Wuming noticed what Sakura said. Hero King Gilgamesh. Then, with the heroic spirit that Shiro Amiya transformed from his future, Wuming could speculate that the card was definitely not Gilgamesh's card. Sure enough, Wuming continued to watch. Assassin sneaked in through the process of Shiro Amiya bringing Sakura in. Assassin's appearance was quite strange, even disgusting. The grayish-white skull mask covered the chin and nose, and the mouth opened and closed along with the skull mask. The whites of the eyes were all black like the pupils, and the legs seemed to be fitted with artificial limbs. The inhuman legs were thin and long, making people feel disgusted. The left hand was a thin black arm, and the right hand was completely made up of tentacles. A large number of tentacles were constantly flying in the air. Seeing the enemy, Shiro Amiya quickly put Sakura behind him and projected a sword. Then, Shiro Amiya began to fight against Assassin. Although Shiro Amiya had improved considerably under Wuming's guidance, his opponent was still using a card that contained the power of a heroic spirit. Gradually, Shiro Amiya began to lose ground. Assassin, on the other hand, believed that Shiro Amiya was no longer a threat, so she knocked Shiro Amiya back with a heavy blow. Then, she gave up on dealing with Shiro Amiya and turned to deal with Sakura instead. Through the conversation between Assassin and Sakura, Wuming learned that Assassin had become mentally unstable. Julian ordered Assassin to be killed and brought back to Sakura. "It seems that the power of the heroic spirit in the card will corrode the user," Wuming said calmly. The card user of Assassin seemed to be Sakura's brother, but he had died 5 years ago. Sakura had personally told Shiro Amiya this. Shiro Amiya, who was in a sorry state, got up from the ground. Sakura stood in front of Shiro Amiya. "Senpai, let me protect you this time." Following Sakura's words, the card in her hand began to glow. Then, under Assassin and Shiro Amiya's shocked gazes, the glow covered Sakura. Then, the glow shattered and the card turned gray. Sakura looked at the card in her hand helplessly. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Why?" Assassin's cruel and disgusting laughter responded to her. "Ha ha 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 ha, my poor sister. Your card has been swapped by Lord Julian. Lord Julian guessed that you would betray him. Why would Lord Julian give you the real card of the Hero King, Gilgamesh? The card you have is only a fake." Assassin calmed down from her laughter and said to Sakura, "Now, die." Following Assassin's death declaration, Sakura looked in Shiro Amiya's direction in despair. "Senpai, goodbye." Assassin's tentacles condensed and reached for Sakura. Shiro Amiya struggled to get up. He quickly and awkwardly drew a few lines in the air. A few special runes appeared in the air. The moment the tentacle arm touched Sakura, Sakura's body trembled. "Teleport!" Shiro Amiya shouted. Sakura was teleported away in an instant. Assassin was stunned on the spot. "What happened? I think I was going to kill Sakura. Where's Sakura? Where's Sakura? Where's Sakura?" Looking at Assassin who had gone crazy, Shiro Amiya rolled and picked up the discarded card that Sakura dropped when she was teleported away. Wuming turned off the surveillance mirror. What happened next was needless to say. Chapter 110. Wuming walked to Mayo's room, knocked on the door, then opened the door and walked in. Brother Wuming. Mayu rushed over as if she was afraid and happy. Wuming hugged Mayu and gently patted Mayo's back. Did you listen to your brother Shiro's words? Wuming asked. Yes, other than when brother Shiro called me to eat, I always stayed in the room and read. Mayu nodded her little head and pointed to the stacks of books on the desk in the room. Mayo's room was not as luxurious as other girls' rooms, but it was very clean. Wuming once suggested to decorate Mayo's room, but Mayu refused. Mayu, because of her childhood experience, had a big difference in thinking compared to other children. Mayu only asked Wuming for the necessary furniture. In addition, Wuming also prepared a large bookshelf and desk for Mayu. Wuming bought books for Mayu in the past 5 years, all of which were placed on this large bookshelf. Through some magic tricks Wuming taught Mayu made up for Mayo's lack of height. After all, this large bookshelf was really big. Wuming looked at this room with some nostalgia. Then, Wuming said to Mayu, Mayu, I want to send you somewhere else for a few days. No. Before Wuming finished, Mayu interrupted him. Wuming looked at the little girl with tears in her eyes and stopped talking. Brother Wuming, are you starting to hate me? Mayu said. How could that be, I'm just. Wuming said hurriedly. Then, why are you chasing me away? Mayu interrupted Wuming again. Wuming smiled helplessly. Then, he squatted down and said to Mayu, Mayu, I want you to go somewhere else for a few days because I'm afraid I can't protect you. Do you understand? Wuming said this because he felt that the strongest hero king card, Gilgamesh, that Sakura had told Shiro Amiya existed. After all, Assassin, Sakura's brother, had said that the strongest hero king, Gilgamesh's card had long been swapped by Julian, which made Wuming even more certain that Gilgamesh's card existed. But, isn't Brother Wuming the strongest hero spirit? Mayu asked. Because Mayu had asked Wuming about his past, Wuming casually said that he could be considered one of the strongest hero spirits. After all, Wuming was not dead, and his original form was the Origin Dragon. The current hero spirit body was just a body made of magic power by signing an equal contract with the suppression power. Strictly speaking, Wuming's Origin Dragon was of a higher level than hero spirits. Just like the gods and the ruler of gods, there was a strict hierarchy that could not be changed. After all, Wuming was the Origin Dragon that was born from the great origin of all worlds. In response to Mayo's question, Wuming was a little helpless and said, That's true, but I'm not in my original form now. Besides, if the other party really has Gilgamesh's card, it's quite disadvantageous for me. Wuming was right. Apart from weapons that contained human principles that could pose a threat to Wuming, divine weapons could also cause harm to Wuming. Who told him to have a divine skill? Divinity B. Rumor has it that the first-generation direct descendant of Tiamat has top-notch divinity. Due to the inaccuracy of the rumors, it was downgraded to B. Because of Wuming's power and mystery, it ended up being a deity related to Tiamat. Although Wuming and Gilgamesh had a good relationship and should be very close, Wuming dared not confirm how the Gilgamesh of this world felt about him. After all, the king Gilgamesh taught by Wuming was a woman. The most important thing was that if it was really Gilgamesh, there must be countless treasures, that is, countless noble phantoms. After all, that was the privilege of the ancient king. Among them, there was no lack of noble phantoms. The most important thing was that Gilgamesh must have Enkidu. Wuming, who used Enkidu, knew how powerful Enkidu was. It was a real divine weapon. For enemies without divinity, Enkidu was just a particularly strong chain, but for enemies with divinity, as long as the target's divinity was higher, Enkidu's binding ability would be higher. And as long as it was an enemy with divinity, once entangled by Enkidu, it would be impossible to get rid of it. At the moment of entanglement, Enkidu would enhance the binding power according to the divinity in the target's body. That was not just the binding of the chain, but also the binding of power, speed, magic, mobility, and so on. And right now, the real Heavenlock, Enkidu, was sleeping together with Wu Ming's main body in the origin of the shaped moon world. There were also Satya and Sebastian, both of them were also sleeping inside the staff of Wu Ming. Wu Ming believed that when Wu Ming came out of the root, both of them would have unprecedented changes. Wu Ming looked at Meiyu. After thinking again and again, he sighed. I really don't know what to do with you. Then, Meiyu smiled. Well, I like brother Wu Ming the most. Meiyu hugged Wu Ming's neck with both hands and said happily. Although Meiyu's voice was very low, the mood contained in it was quite loud. Well, since you are relieved, then let me go. What do you want to eat? I'll make it. Wu Ming patted Meiyu's little head and said with a smile. Omelette rice. Meiyu whispered. Wu Ming was taken aback for a moment, then he was relieved. Can't I? Meiyu looked at Wu Ming pitifully. Wu Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's not that you can't, but you eat omelette rice almost every day, aren't you tired of it? Meiyu quickly shook her little head and said, How can that be? As long as it's brother Wu Ming's omelette rice, I won't be tired of it for the rest of my life. Wu Ming stood up, touched Meiyu's little head, and said, Then, you go find your big brother Shiro and ask him to come over and help me. Tonight, we can have one more person in our house, maybe we can make red bean rice. One more person. Red bean rice. Meiyu, who was still young, couldn't understand the custom of red bean rice. In this regard, Wu Ming just smiled. It's nothing, just go find him. Remember to be polite when you face that sister, she might be your future sister-in-law. I know. Then, Meiyu went to find Shiro Omiya curiously. After all, Meiyu was still interested in this sister-in-law's words. Then, I'll start too, delicious dinner. Then, Wu Ming walked into the kitchen. In a moment, the aroma wafted out of the kitchen and surrounded the Omiya mansion for a long time. Chapter 111. When Shiro Omiya came to the kitchen, there were two beautiful figures, one big and one small, standing behind him. Since Sakura's injuries were no longer serious, Sakura wanted to cook dinner together. Meiyu, on the other hand, came along because all three of them were in the kitchen. Thus, the four of them cooked dinner together. Naturally, a lot of lively things happened. First, Shiro Omiya introduced Sakura to Wu Ming. Sakura's full name was Sakura Midu. 5 years ago, she was from the Mitomo family, one of the 3 Yu families that had been completely wiped out. Due to the heavy casualties of the Enosaka family, Sakura was not killed and survived. The user of the assassin card was Sakura Midu's brother, Shinji Midu. His original body had been killed 5 years ago. Julian used the substitution magic to replace Shinji Midu's personality and soul with the body of a puppet, turning it into a puppet that obeyed orders. However, due to the incompatibility of the body and soul, coupled with the erosion of the power of the heroic spirit in the assassin card, Shinji Midu's personality had long been disrupted. He had become a mental patient who obeyed Julian's orders. When Wu Ming was treating Sakura Midu, he used magic to check Sakura Midu's body structure. He was sure that she had not been killed, but was living in the world as a person. He did not want her brother, Shinji Midu, to be played with after his death, causing his personality to be disrupted. In the end, he was freed by Shiro Omiya. That's right. In the end, Shinji Midu gave up resisting because he instantly regained his personality in the face of the threat of death. From there, he understood the cause and effect of the matter. In the end, he asked Shiro Amiya to take care of his sister, Sakura Midu. After that, he was freed by Shiro Amiya. Wuming held a skeptical attitude towards the claim that he was saved by another member of the Yu family. According to Wuming's knowledge, one of the three families of the Yu family, the Enosaka family, only had a 10-year-old girl left. If Sakura Midu was really helped by the Enosaka family, then the two girls would have to depend on each other for survival. Judging from Sakura Midu's expression, she seemed to have some conflict with the Enosaka family. However, that was a personal matter after all, and Wuming was not in a position to ask about it. Anyway, at the moment, Sakura Midu was not a threat to Wuming and the others. Not to mention that Sakura Midu was willing to risk her life for Shiro Amiya to give the strongest hero King Gilgamesh card to Shiro Amiya. At the moment, the Amiya mansion was Wuming's magic workshop. The power of a caster was that he could create his own territory. A powerful caster could even be called a god in his own territory. The reason why Shinji Midu could sneak in was because Wuming had left his magic workshop, and Shiro Amiya, who was temporarily in charge of the magic workshop, was still a half-baked magician. Wuming was shocked that I could teleport Sakura Midu away when Assassin activated her noble phantasm. If it was done by Wuming, it would be very easy, and if Wuming was in the magic workshop, he could kill Assassin the moment she entered the Amiya mansion. Of course, that was if Wuming let Assassin in. If Wuming didn't want to, let alone Assassin, even Berserker wouldn't be able to come in. Of course, if it was those heroic spirits, it would be a different story. Then accompanied by Wuming's ridicule, it seems to be the power of love. Shiro Amiya and Sakura Midu blushed like a monkey's butt. After the four of them had finished cooking dinner, they gathered at the dining table and had a delicious meal in their eyes. Sakura, you can stay here tonight. Wuming said to Sakura, who was cleaning up the dishes with Shiro Amiya. Hey! Hey! Sakura Midu and Shiro Amiya both made a strange sound. There's nothing strange about it. After all, Sakura has been ordered to be killed by Julian. If you let Sakura walk around casually, she may die. The two of them reacted, and then Shiro Amiya said, That's right, Sakura. It's very dangerous for you to go out casually. It's better for you to stay here. Sakura Midu blushed, then nodded, Then I'll stay here. Please take care of me, Senpai, Onie-sama, and Sister Mayu. Sakura Midu's ambiguous words made Shiro Amiya a little uncomfortable, but Wuming smiled and nodded. Mayu didn't understand the meaning behind it, so she replied to Sakura Midu. Please take care of me, Sister Sakura. Just like that, the three siblings in the Amiya mansion became four. That night, Wuming directly used the magic workshop's ability to clear out a room for Sakura Midu to live in. Wuming didn't need a room at first, but after Amiya Kiritsugu passed away, Wuming added the identity of Amiya's distant relative and prepared a room for himself. After all, since he was going to stay for a long time, Wuming wasn't someone who didn't know how to enjoy life. So the three rooms were arranged in the order of Wuming, Mayu, and Shiro. Because Wuming and the other two rooms were next to each other, Sakura Midu's room was also next to each other. In this way, the rooms were arranged in the order of Wuming, Mayu, Shiro, and Sakura. At night, everyone else fell asleep, and Wuming stood alone in the courtyard. Wuming picked up the card in his hand, which depicted an assassin wearing a skull mask. Install, Dream Summon, the card began to glow, turned into a stream of light, and instantly covered Wuming, and then the light dissipated. At this moment, Wuming was wearing a black tights, a cloak similar to a coat covered his whole body, and the cloak was constantly swaying with the cool night breeze. Wuming's face was wearing a slightly majestic and ferocious skull mask. Through the mask, Wuming looked at his right hand, which was no different from usual, but it was bandaged. Wuming learned the use of this card through Golden Green Chalice analysis. Is this one of Hassan Sabah? Wuming said. Chalice, analyze my current physical condition. After Wuming finished speaking, a pair of golden green dragon horns appeared in the air. Master, your body is possessed by a strange magical power. Your right hand has mutated, and an evil magical power covered it. Other than that, your physical condition is fine, and it has slightly improved. Although your body will not be affected, this evil magical power is harmful to your body, and it is recommended that you withdraw from the heroic spirit state immediately. Since Wuming said those words to Golden Green 5 years ago, although Golden Green still called Wuming Master, its tone was no longer as stiff as before. Instead, it was full of emotion. In general, as long as it was harmful to Wuming, no matter how harmful it was, Golden Green Chalice would always give advice. I know, Chalice, I want to study this class card again, please indulge me this time. Wuming said with a smile. You always say that. As expected, I'm just a magic costume. It's impossible for an owner to listen to the words of a magic costume. Golden Emerald Kelly was silent for a while before she said sadly. You too, every time it's a trick. Forget it, let's sleep first, and enjoy these last few days. It was obvious that this was not the first time this pair of master and servant had this conversation. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.